morning, everyone. I'm Keisha Latterly, and welcome to Today in Parliament. Well, the House of Assembly back in session today. The focus for today, the Credit Reporting Act. It's an extension of legislation to shore up financial services, a major focus of the parliamentary agenda of late. That debate gets underway at 10 o'clock this morning. But right now, we're going to take a look back at last week's session, which included the Travelers Currency Declaration Amendment Bill. Minister of Finance Peter Turnquest on that bill, which changes the meaning of currency declaration.
Global community
has
come together with a set of protocols that seek to identify and to arrest the movement of the proceeds of crime as another tool in dismantling the systems that we know exist globally. The bill that is before us seeks to strengthen the 2015 Travelers Currency Declaration Act so that it is in line with the Financial Action Task Force, Caribbean Action Task Force regulations and best standards. And so this bill seeks to give further definition to what is required to be declared and how it is to be declared by persons exiting or entering the Bahamas. So the bill in clause 3 seeks to make reference to a new form, C-17 and C-18, as provided for in the Customs Management regulations, to provide for the completion of the currency declaration form by all persons entering the Bahamas by air and leaving the Bahamas by air, except those departing from pre-cleared flights to the United States. And that is for obvious reasons. The United States has for some time had a requirement for, through its pre-clearance facilities, for persons entering the United States to declare any valuables over $10,000. But this act, or this bill before us, seeks to define even further what needs to be declared to include precious stones and bullion. So not only do you have to declare currency and negotiable instruments, but you're also now required to declare bullion and uncut precious stones and gems. Because we know in the days of what they call blood diamonds and all the rest of it, that these carry value and can easily be used as payment for, again, for illegal activities. Sorry? Yeah. I was just talking about Section 3. Yeah. Going back to Section 2, and talking about precious metals and precious stones, that is Section 3A. Moving to Section 3A D, the bill proposes that any declaration should be recorded by the proper officer. So when a traveler declares that he's traveling with over $10,000 in cash or negotiable instruments or in bullion or in precious stones, that the officer receiving that information is to report it to the Financial Intelligence Unit so that there can be proper cross-referencing. moving to Section 4. Section 4 seeks to give greater definition and clarity to the detention, seizure, and search for these items. So it says that Customs, Bahamas Customs, may seize and detain in whole or in part the amount of the in the case of a non-declaration. Customs can seize in whole or in part the non-declared or falsely declared currency or bearer negotiable instrument or precious metals or precious stones if they have reasonable grounds, for suspecting that it is or that they are the proceeds of an offense, or if they are terrorist related, or if it represents an instrumentality used or intended for the use in the commission of such an offense, or if there's a false declaration.
Quite a role to play in that new amendment. Let's hear why Ankleston MP Glenys Hanna Martin took issue with that.
Yeah, I want to raise that because, and then of course, this regime is now requiring that any declaration made will automatically go to the Financial Intelligence Unit. And it seems to me, I'm not sure if you're just sharing people's personal business with FIU, or if you're doing it, because I thought that it only goes there if there are suspicious issues. But this appears to be a procedural thing. You fill it out, it goes to FIU. And I'm just wondering whether FIU needs to know all of my personal affairs when I'm traveling through the Lynden Pendling International Airport or any airport. So I think that you need to look at that because it seems an unnecessary, burdensome, bureaucratic burden being put on the FIU, and it doesn't seem to make sense in the context of what you're seeking to achieve. The other thing is, I think that it's very important for officers. I need to know, I'm hoping, well, two things I want to know. I don't think we heard it, whether what the industry has to say about this, whether they have any thoughts on this. Where else is this happening in any other jurisdiction? I know you're saying that we're trying to be compliant. And let me just say, when you spoke about the history of our country and illegal activities, you went to the drugs, etc. But Bahamas has had a history of that, going back to bootlegging. And so I always want you to no, I'm serious about that. We always have to be cognizant of the nature of it. Otherwise, we will have a jaundiced view of the way our economy has worked over a period of years. Okay, I missed that part. So I'd like to know what the industry is saying about it and where this is happening elsewhere. Secondly, I'm concerned about training because this is now bringing a new sort of law enforcement component to the duties of customs officers. And you talk about having reasonable suspicions and all these sort of terms that are in criminal law. And so I'm wondering what is the preparation for training, because otherwise we're going to have serious problems where you have officers having some sort of perceptions and then it becomes something else. And so I wonder if we could learn what ground is being prepared for customs officers to engage in this. I'd like to know what the industry is saying about it, and I'd like to know where this is happening elsewhere. We'd like to know what you mean by precious metals and stones, because does it include a pearl necklace? And then we want to know why is everything going to the FIU? Are we now creating an environment where all of our business now is going now to agencies that really have no jurisdiction unless it falls within a particular parameter of concern in terms of law enforcement?
Well, some of the contributions there on the Traveler's Currency Declaration Amendment Bill in Parliament next week. Also on the agenda last week, the issue of electricity in the Bahamas, the amendment bill on the electricity rate reduction bond, also the subject of debate last week. Member of Parliament for Yamacraw and Minister of State and Legal Affairs, Ellsworth Johnson, led off that debate. Let's hear what the terms of that amendment are.
Mr. Speaker, if memory serves us correctly, we would know that in accordance with Section 12.4 of the Electricity Act 2015, on the 8th of February 2016, the Bahamas Power and Light Company entered into a management service agreement with Power Secure. And they entered into that management agreement for the purposes of fulfilling the functions and powers of BPL. And what are those functions and powers? And I will read just a few of them from Section 9. It's to secure a safe and at a nominal cost, reliable and environmentally sustainable supply of electricity within the Bahamas. I'm reading from Section 9 for the functions and powers of the Substantive Act. Pardon me? Yes, ma'am. B, to oversee and monitor the electricity supply within the Bahamas, to establish plans for the modernization and development of the electricity supply in the Bahamas, to develop and maintain an efficient, coordinated, and economical system of supply of electricity to consumers in the islands of New Providence and such family islands as the minister may order. And I'm just going to read one more. And H, to support the government national energy policy, including promoting and facilitating the development and use of the renewable electricity generation resources and technology. And so when that contract was first entered into with Power Secure, those were the functions expected of that company. Bahamas Power and Light, Mr. Speaker, as we all know, would have terminated the agreement with Power Secure and is in the process of approving a management, Bahamian managers, to undertake the functions that were previously contracted to Power Secure. Pardon me? We've created a management team comprising Bahamians who will now be responsible for managing the affairs and functions of BPL within the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Pardon me? You will, wait. Mr. Speaker, I will focus on my presentation. Thus, the necessity for the amendment to the Electricity Act. And so, Mr. Speaker, I now go to the amendments. So the Electricity Act was drafted on the premise that the statutory function of the Bahamas Power and Light would be performed by a systems operator. As such, and that system operator was Power Secure. And now that we no longer have Power Secure, we're looking to facilitate the implementation of the function or the carrying on of the function of the electricity of the BPL by way of the amendment to the Act. And so in order to do that, Mr. Speaker, I now draw your attention to the proposed amendments within the Electricity Amendment Bill. And we propose to amend Section 2A of the Substantive Act by the deletion of the word systems operator. B, by deletion of the definition within the definitions section of systems operator. There's also an intended amendment of Section 12 of the Principal Act. Section 12 of the Principal Act is amended by the repeal and replacement of Section 3 as follows. BPL shall have responsibility for the performance of the functions under Section 9. There's also a proposal for the amendment and replacement of Section 4 of Section 12 in the Principal Act. And you can have a read, for those of you watching my television, can have a read of the Substantive Act to see the sections that we intend to amend, just for the purpose of regularizing the management team and removing the whole concept of the systems operator as a result of the termination of the contract. Section 7 of the proposed bill amends Section 21 of the Principal Act. Section 20 of the Principal Act is amended in subsection 1 by the insertion immediately after the words securities of the word or of the word securities and the insertion of or by way of draft otherwise. And then there's another amendment of section 21 by the insertion immediately after section 1 of the following new subsection, and it will read, BPL may guarantee in such manner and upon such terms as is deemed fit the payment of interest or principal or both, or any monies borrowed in accordance with subsection 1. There's also section 8 of the proposed amendment, amends section 24 of the Principal Act. Section 24 of the Principal Act is repealed and replaced. You can go to the Principal Act and look at section 24. And we'll just take that section out, and it speaks to the management and operation of the section. And that entire new section is to be placed there. And it just speaks to BPL shall be responsible for the following electricity generation, termination, and distribution of supply of the generation of electricity. Section 9 of the intended act speaks to the intended amendment of the first schedule of the act. And as I indicated, it is intended to remove, as with the other sections, the term systems operator, to bring the intention of the proposed amendment into fruition, and that is to allow for the Bahamian management team to fully manage the operations of BPL and to recognize in the people's way the functions and powers of the corporation, as I have indicated earlier. Mr. Speaker, I turn my attention now to the electricity rate bond, which is a very, very brief amendment, Mr. Speaker, and it seeks to make provision for short title of the commencement provision, and the bill seeks to provide for some consequential amendments to the electricity rate bond, and I would take you through that, Mr. Speaker. And the short title and commencement, it says what the act is intended to do. It says when the act shall come into operation. Section 2 of the proposed amendment to the electricity rate bond, Amendment Bill 2018, amends Section 6 of the Principal Act. And subsection 2A of Section 6 of the Principal Act is repealed and replaced by the following: a director, officer, or employee of the corporation, a BPL, ERCA, or the servicer. And again, as I indicated earlier, when looking to the amendments, it seeks to remove the systems operator, which, because I indicated earlier that the contract with the systems operator, who was then Power Secure, is now being removed. There's also an amendment to Section 7, and subsection 4A of 7 of the Principal Act is repealed, and as follows: BPL may authorize an agent or subcontractor to act as servicer on behalf of BPL. And that is the extent of the amendments, Mr. Speaker. As I indicated earlier, Mr. Speaker, the amendments are purely intended to bring to fruition the intention of Parliament, which is recognizing the termination of the contract with Power Secure and the appointment of a Bahamian competent and efficient management team to transition BPL in terms of the service that is obligated to provide to the Bahamian people. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
That was Yamacraw
Is there a
MP
second?
Ellsworth Johnson there last week in the House of Assembly on the electricity rate reduction bond. Now, some other issues also came up during that session that weren't exactly on the agenda. Brave Davis, the Cat Island, Rumkey and San Salvador Member of Parliament, brought up the issue of banking in the Bahamas. Of course, as we see several banks consolidate branches and move out of the family islands. Here was his admonition to the government on that.
And so it is disturbing. I just wondered whether the government was in conversations with the Royal Bank of Canada over these matters, and if so, whether or not they made any alternative suggestions to minimize the impact of the loss of jobs, or to minimize the pain that these persons would feel. I'd like to know that, because I think because of the impact of what is intended and planned, it's a matter that the government ought to have paid some attention to. I'd like to know what the government would have done in those circumstances. And then going forward, what are we going to do to help the financial services sector? How are we going to reposition ourselves to ensure that we save that part of our economy? And if there are no ideas, then what would be the alternative you may have in mind to replace that which we are losing?
Well, the Speaker of the House of Assembly held the floor for a time during last week's sitting as well, reporting on a conference he attended for speakers. Let's listen in.
As this is always on the floor, I wish to take this opportunity to give a brief report on the 24th Conference of Speakers and Presiding Officers of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, also known by the acronym CISPOC. CISPOC is a biennial conference of speakers and presiding officers of the Commonwealth, which aims to promote parliamentary democracy and develop parliamentary institutions through shared experiences. The conference was hosted in the Seychelles and hosted by Speaker Patrick Pillay on the island of Mahé in the Republic of Seychelles. The Republic of Seychelles is an archipelago of 115 islands similar to the Bahamas, located in the Indian Ocean. It's located at latitude 4.6 degrees south and longitude 55 degrees east. In other words, we were on the other side of the world and in another hemisphere. The Seychelles has an estimated population of 90,000 persons, with the capital situated in Victoria. The Bahamas delegation to the conference comprised the Speaker of the Honorable House of Assembly, the President of the Senate, and the Clerk of the Parliament. The conference was structured so that participants receive lectures during the morning sessions and engage in group workshops during the afternoon sessions. The main topics of discussions included the role of the Speaker in strengthening parliamentary diplomacy in both regional and international cooperation. And under that topic, matters concerning the ensuring that parliamentary presence is on the global scene, Proceeding independently but often in parallel with the executive, we suggested that Parliament maintain an open door policy with respect to visits from diplomats, that in light of the limited resources, members should focus on pooling resources and on improving parliamentary arrangements and strengthening links to share resources and reliance on other jurisdictions, as opposed to reinventing the wheel. Parliament should support government in its own diplomacy by inviting staff from other jurisdictions in exchange programs. And it was recommended that Parliament assist by establishing who we are as a people and by leading discussions on constitutional matters and functional independence of Parliament. The next topic of discussion was the use of technology to support members and the House business. Social media, the impact of social media was the main focus of this topic, and it was felt that it enables Parliament to reach and teach larger numbers of people through new tools such as e-petitions, mobile applications, the development of paperless chambers and committees, and through e-consultations. There was a recognition of the challenges of the impact of technology on the relationship with constituents. For example, it was highlighted that throughout the Commonwealth, everybody is experiencing the same difficulty as it relates to fake news, reputational risks, and that there's no guarantee of productive dialogue with respect to the use of social media. This topic was so lively, debated, that it sparked a discussion on parliamentary privilege, and a resolution was passed to include parliamentary privilege as a main topic for the next conference. The third major area of discussion was strengthening parliamentary research for effective functioning of the legislature. It was advised that all parliaments should have a library and appropriate resources to produce research papers for members to allow members to hold government to account. Members should be provided with their own research persons to ensure accurate provision of information given the emergence of fake news and alternate facts. Educational material on the historical role of Parliament and procedures of Parliament should be made available. Issues concern arising out of the workshop was the matter of members using and relying on information gleaned from social media and the internet in their presentations to Parliament. The fourth area of concern was the emerging security issues for parliamentarians. There was a recognition that the global security situation has significantly changed with the increasing possibilities of cyber attacks by cyber criminals. Cybersecurity, new frontiers of human interaction through rapid transformation and advancement of technologies, discovered that members were open to political blackmail, extortion, hacking of personal and official emails, and that there were, in addition, personal concerns, particularly security at the workplace, because of issues including the availability of firearms, drugs, human trafficking, gang violence, terrorism, unemployment, and just pure political mischief. Social media and the viral nature of negative spread of facts on Facebook, WhatsApp, Instagram, and Twitter were also recognized as a common risk throughout the Commonwealth. And finally, there was a special plenary session on the role of speakers in strengthening parliaments as an institution of accountability, openness, and transparency. And this session, in my estimation, eradicated any myth or any perception that the role and function of the Speaker is simply to maintain order in debates. In fact, it was emphasized that the Speaker should be fostering greater connectivity of Parliament with citizens through improved administration and the provision of parliamentary services to citizens. There should be greater contribution to the relationship between Parliament and the executive. The Speaker should be about encouraging fairness and openness with the executive branch of government and emphasizing the accountability, transparency, and participation of citizens. And at the end of the conference, there's a standing committee that governs the administration of the conference. And at that time, the Bahamas and Belize were nominated and elected to represent the Caribbean, the Americas, and the Atlantic region, and thereby replacing Barbados and Jamaica on the standing committee. It is felt that the conference was so enlightening in nature that a report was necessary, and some of the presentations are annexed to the report, and this report will be tabled so that interested members can get copies of the presentation at that conference.
Well, that was House Speaker Halson Mousri last week on a conference of speakers within the Commonwealth. Right now, you're looking at a live shot from inside the House of Assembly this morning, where the session is expected to begin momentarily. The focus this morning of the agenda, the Credit Reporting Act, another bill to shore up the policies and procedures of the financial services industry within the country. Again, that session expected to begin momentarily, but right now we'll take another look back at last week, where the focus was the Currency Declaration Amendment Bill. Here is the Member of Parliament of East Grand Bahama, Peter Turnquest.
Global community has come together with a set of protocols that seek to identify and to arrest the movement of the proceeds of crime as another tool in dismantling the systems that we know exist globally. The bill that is before us seeks to strengthen the 2015 Traveler's Currency Declaration Act so that it is in line with the Financial Action Task Force, Caribbean Action Task Force regulations and best standards. And so this bill seeks to give further definition to what is required to be declared and how it is to be declared by persons exiting or entering the Bahamas. So the bill in clause 3 seeks to make reference to a new form, C-17 and C-18, as provided for in the Customs Management regulations, to provide for the completion of the currency declaration form by all persons entering the Bahamas by air and leaving the Bahamas by air, except those departing from pre-cleared flights to the United States. And that is for obvious reasons. The United States has for some time had a requirement for, through its pre-clearance facilities, for persons entering the United States to declare any valuables over $10,000. But this act, or this bill before us, seeks to define even further what needs to be declared, to include precious stones and bullion. So not only do you have to declare currency and negotiable instruments, but you're also now required to declare bullion and uncut precious stones and gems. Because we know in the days of what they call blood diamonds and all the rest of it, that these carry value and can easily be used as payment for, again, for illegal activities. Sorry? Yeah. I was just talking about Section 3. Yeah. Going back to Section 2, and talking about precious metals and precious stones, that is Section, 3A. Moving to Section 3A D, the bill proposes that any declaration should be recorded by the proper officer. So when a traveler declares that he's traveling with over $10,000 in cash or negotiable instruments or in bullion or in precious stones, that the officer receiving that information is to report it to the Financial Intelligence Unit so that there can be proper cross-referencing. Moving to Section 4. Section 4 seeks to give greater definition and clarity to the detention, seizure, and search for these items. So it says that Customs, Bahamas Customs, may seize and detain in whole or in part the amount of the in the case of a non-declaration. Customs can seize in whole or in part the non-declared or falsely declared currency or bearer negotiable instrument or precious metals or precious stones if they have reasonable grounds for suspecting that it is or that they are the proceeds of an offense, or if they are terrorist related, or if it represents an instrumentality used or intended for the use in the commission of such an offense, or if there's a false declaration.
That was Deputy Prime Minister East End MP Peter Turnquest last week in the House of Assembly. The Financial Intelligence Unit, as we reported, will play a major role in this new amendment. We'll hear why the Angliston MP Glenys Hanna Martin took issue with that last week.
Yeah, I want to raise that because, and then of course, this regime is now requiring that any declaration made will automatically go to the Financial Intelligence Unit. And it seems to me, I'm not sure if you're just sharing people's personal business with FIU, or if you're doing it, because I thought that it only goes there if there are suspicious issues. But this appears to be a procedural thing. You fill it out, it goes to FIU. And I'm just wondering whether FIU needs to know all of my personal affairs when I'm traveling through the Lynden Pinley International Airport or any airport. So I think that you need to look at that because it seems an unnecessary, burdensome, bureaucratic burden being put on the FIU, and it doesn't seem to make sense in the context of what you're seeking to achieve. The other thing is, I think that it's very important for officers. I need to know, I'm hoping, well, two things I want to know. I don't think we heard it, whether what the industry has to say about this, whether they have any thoughts on this. Where else is this happening in any other jurisdiction? I know you're saying that we're trying to be compliant. And let me just say, when you spoke about the history of our country and illegal activities, you went to the drugs, etc. But the Bahamas has had a history of that, going back to bootlegging. And so I always want you to no, I'm serious about that. We always have to be cognizant of the nature of it. Otherwise, we will have a jaundiced view of the way our economy has worked over a period of years. Okay, I missed that part. So I'd like to know what the industry is saying about it, and where this is happening elsewhere. Secondly, I'm concerned about training, because this is now bringing a new sort of law enforcement component to the duties of customs officers. And you talk about having reasonable suspicions and all these sort of terms that are in criminal law. And so I'm wondering, what is the preparation for training? Because otherwise we're going to have serious problems where you have officers having some sort of perceptions, and then it becomes something else. And so I wonder if we could learn what ground is being prepared for customs officers to engage in this. I'd like to know what the industry is saying about it, and I'd like to know where this is happening elsewhere. We'd like to know what you mean by precious metals and stones, because does it include a pearl necklace? And then we want to know, why is everything going to the FIU? Are we now creating an environment where all of our business now is going now to agencies that really have no jurisdiction, unless it falls within a particular parameter of concern in terms of law enforcement?
That was Engliston MP Glenys Hanna Martin. Also on the floor during last week's sitting of the House of Assembly, Yamacraw MP Ellsworth Johnson, and he addressed the electricity rate reduction bond, which essentially places in the hands of Bahamian management the operation of BPL.
Mr. Speaker, if memory serves us correctly, we would know that in accordance with Section 12(4) of the Electricity Act 2015, on the 8th of February 2016, the Bahamas Power and Light Company entered into a management service agreement with Power Secure. And they entered into that management agreement for the purposes of fulfilling the functions and powers of BPL. And what are those functions and powers? And I will read just a few of them from Section 9. It's to secure a safe and at a nominal cost, reliable and environmentally sustainable supply of electricity within the Bahamas. I'm reading from Section 9 for the functions and powers of the Substantive Act. Pardon me? Yes, ma'am. B, to oversee and monitor the electricity supply within the Bahamas, to establish plans for the modernization and development of the electricity supply in the Bahamas, to develop and maintain an efficient, coordinated, and economical system of supply of electricity to consumers in the islands of New Providence and such family islands as the minister may order. And I'm just going to read one more. And H, to support the government national energy policy, including promoting and facilitating the development and use of the renewable electricity generation resources and technology. And so when that contract was first entered into with Power Secure, those were the functions expected of that company. Bahamas Power and Light, Mr. Speaker, as we all know, would have terminated the agreement with Power Secure and is in the process of approving a management, Bahamian managers, to undertake the functions that were previously contracted to Power Secure. Pardon me? We've created a management team comprising Bahamians who will now be responsible for managing the affairs and functions of BPL within the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Pardon me? You will, wait. Mr. Speaker, I will focus on my presentation. Thus, the necessity for the amendment to the Electricity Act.
All right, the session about to begin for today in the House of Assembly. We see the chaplain has taken up position for the opening prayer. We take it now live to the House of Assembly.
Mr. Speaker, honorable members, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Good morning. Thoughts for this week in keeping with the Lord's pronouncement for our nation for 2018, supported by his wide and varied promises. We have a right to claim the promises of God in keeping with the preamble in our Constitution. This shall be a Christian nation. This nation was founded on spiritual values. Therefore, the promises of God in his holy book, called the Bible, from Genesis to Revelation, are ours to claim and stand on. Honorable members, think on these promises of God and claim them for yourselves this week. Jeremiah 20:11-14. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you hope and a future. Then you will call upon me and come and pray to me, and I will listen to you. You will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart. I will be found by you. Isaiah 43:18-19. Forget the former things. Do not dwell in the past. See, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs forth. Do you not perceive it? I am making a way in the desert and streams in the wasteland. The wild animals honor me, the jackals and the owls, because I provide water in the desert and streams in the wasteland to give drink to my people, my chosen, the people I formed for myself, that they may proclaim my praise. Our Lord Jesus Christ speaking, Luke 10:19. I have given you authority to trample on snakes and scorpions and to overcome all the powers of the enemy. Nothing will harm you. Shall we pray? Heavenly Father, we enter your gates with thanksgiving and into your courts with praise. For our God is a good God, and his love endures forever. His faithfulness continues through all generations. We thank you for all those who have the rule over our nation, inclusive of Her Majesty the Queen and our Governor General. Grant to both of them good health and long life. Monday evening, January 29th, your servant, Honorable Prime Minister, presented his government's economic plans to the nation. With his permission, we present these plans to you, Lord, for your blessings, modifications, and additions, as you deem best for the benefits of your people who call the Bahamas home. We are presenting these plans and proposals to you in keeping with your instructions. Proverbs 16:3. Commit to the Lord whatever you do, and your plans will succeed. Father, you are well aware of the challenges our people are facing in every island and in the city. Send prosperity. Send prosperity now. But most important, will thou not revive us again, that thy people may rejoice in thee? Revive us again, fill each heart with thy love, and may each soul be rekindled with fire from above. Hallelujah, thine the glory. Hallelujah, amen. Hallelujah, thine the glory. Revive us again. Restore us again, O God. We thank you for the good things you are doing through your servants, our honorable ministers, and junior ministers and permanent secretaries in their various ministries, and our members of Parliament serving in their respective constituencies. Lead, guide, and direct every member of Parliament, inclusive of the members in our opposition party, led by Honorable Philip Brave Davis. Finally, Father, we thank you that your hand is upon our nation. and you do hear and answer the prayers offered from this place and every place in Jesus' name. Hear the prayer of your servants. As we pray together, the prayer you taught your disciples to pray, saying, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not in temptation, deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, power, and the glory. Amen. Have a wonderful day.
Return Quest, Brent Simonet, Desmond Bannister, Brentwood Wells, Jeffrey Lloyd, Dr. Dwayne Sands, Marvin Ding, Frankie Campbell, Dionisio Diagula, Michael Pintard, Darren Henfield, Ramal Ferreira, Lanisha Rolls, Renzel Rolls, Ellsworth Johnson, Philip Davis, Vaughn Miller, Lakeisha Parker Edgecombe, Iram Lewis, Carlton Bolag, James Aubrey, Travis Robinson, Adrian Gibson, Donald Saunders, Frederick McAlpine, Hank Johnson, Mark Hume, Michael Folks, Miriam Reckley Emmanuel, Reese Chipman, Ruben Rami, Ricky Mackey, Shannon Don Cartwright, Shawnell Ferguson, Glenatana Martin, Kysel Ford, Chester Cooper.
Good morning, honorable members. Order of business. No communication by the Speaker. Introduction and swearing in of new members. Laying of documents by ministers. The Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Carmichael.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to lay the audited financial statements for the Bridge Authority for the year ended December 31st, 2016. The Independent Auditor's Report.
Order that the documents be brought up. Order that the document to lie on the table. Further laying of documents by ministers. The Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Garden Hills.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to lay on the table of the House the report of the Public Service Commission of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas for the years 2014-2016.
Order that the document be brought up. Order that the document to lie on the table. Further laying of documents by ministers. The Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Garden Hills.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave the House to lay on the table the National Insurance Board of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas 2016 Annual Report.
Order that the document be brought up. order that the document will lie on the table. For the laying of documents by ministers.
Mr. Speaker.
Okay, just before we move on to the next item, which is statement and communication by ministers, the honorable member for Angliston has indicated to the chair that she wishes to raise an issue. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Angliston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaker, you may recall, the House may recall, and you may recall, Mr. Speaker, that last week I made certain assertions in the Parliament which were ultimately struck from the record. Excuse me. And in the course of that, I think there was some exchange between the chair and myself about what transpired, and I was very concerned about that, Mr. Speaker, because one of the things that was, I think, the impression given was that I made statements to the effect, and I was able to get the Hansard, that it doesn't matter, or I don't care what the chair rules, you could do whatever you want to do. And then you indicate you can pull the Hansard record, Mr. Speaker. And I got the record, Mr. Speaker, on the issue when the matter was challenged by the member for Elizabeth. And what I, in fact, said, Mr. Speaker, is I am not with, I said, well, I said, the member for Elizabeth accuses me of grandstanding. I have a track record. I don't grandstand. I don't make assertions of this nature. I don't think I've ever done it. I am not withdrawing, Mr. Speaker. You can be free to do whatever you want, but they know why these women were terminated. It is based on their politics in those communities, and they know why they were terminated, Mr. Speaker. I will not withdraw because I know this is the reason they were terminated, Mr. Speaker. And I wanted the record to reflect that I never used language to the effect that I don't care what the chair does, etc., because it gives an impression, Mr. Speaker, about me that is not correct. What I was communicating was that I was holding firm to the position, Mr. Speaker, and there is the chair has the authority to strike, which the chair did in fact do. The other issue, Mr. Speaker, is the one, I think the chair indicated that I did not, I was not speaking to a specific minister in the Parliament, and I looked at the Hansard again in the second sentence of my intervention. I spoke about the two women, young women, who were terminated by the Airport Authority, and I said, the minister is here, which is the minister for the Airport Authority. I was speaking specifically to the minister, Mr. Speaker, and not at large, as was, I think you indicated during those proceedings. And in fact, the other point, the third point, so the third point is the one, I think the chair ruled that whenever a minister, any minister, refutes something, if I could find the wording of it, whenever a minister, any minister refutes, let me get the exact language, Mr. Speaker. Sorry.
While you're getting the exact language
yes.
on that particular point, also give the House the exact language that the Speaker used
I will, Mr. Speaker.
with respect to
sorry.
the statement that you made.
Okay, yes, Mr. Speaker. The exact language used by the that the Speaker said that the statement that I made. Sorry. Okay. Now, this is on page 2 of the transcript, Mr. Speaker. Now, we had a circumstance early this morning where, in my estimation, members were being disrespectful to the chair. First of all, whenever the chair is speaking, all members should be quiet. The chair should be heard in silence, and no statement from any member should ever come or be directed to the chair that, quote, doesn't matter, or I don't care what the chair rules. You could do whatever you want to do. I can pull the Hansard records, Speaker. That is the quote from the chair, Mr. Speaker. And the final point, Mr. Speaker, is just a rules one, and the chair can assist me, Mr. Speaker, which deals with the issue of, because the minister was here, the minister responsible for aviation and the Airport Authority was here. He did not take issue with what I said. The member for Elizabeth, who is the Minister of Health, took issue in this Parliament, Mr. Speaker. And the point that came out of that, I think, Mr. Speaker, you ruled that, sorry, I'm trying to find that quickly, Mr. Speaker, on the issue of ministers, the role of ministers in the Parliament. Where is it? Okay. The custom, this is page 3 of the afternoon session, Speaker. Well, the custom, and you are a senior member for this Parliament, much more senior than I am. The custom of the Parliament is whenever a minister challenges a statement of a member and the minister denies that statement, then the onus transfers to the member who is making that statement to substantiate it or prove it. And I was seeking to argue that if that was correct, Mr. Speaker, it could only refer to the minister with portfolio responsibility who happened to be actually sitting in the Parliament, Mr. Speaker, sitting there and not taking issue, but the Minister of Health on the other end took issue, Mr. Speaker. So that would be the only thing. I was not able to find a rule which says that when any minister, and I think that when I queried that, Mr. Speaker, you indicated that I was speaking to the House at large and not to a specific minister. And I think the Hansard indicates that I was speaking to a specific minister. Mr. Speaker, I make these points only to show, Mr. Speaker, that to illustrate that I do not recall, and I don't think the record reflects that I sought or did disrespect the chair in the manner in which it was expressed and which I've just read into the record again, Speaker. And secondly, that I was not speaking to the Parliament at large, but to a specific minister who was present in the Parliament. And the final point, Mr. Speaker, is that it would seem to me that if there was to be a challenge of the the facts relative to the operation of that ministry, it should come from the minister who is sitting there and not from a minister who has a totally disconnected portfolio responsibility, Speaker. And I hear the leader of the House saying Cabinet has collective responsibility. That would tell me, Mr. Speaker, that this matter would have gone to Cabinet, which should have been very peculiar, Mr. Speaker, that a determination of this nature would go to a Cabinet, Mr. Speaker. The leader of the House from his seat, I indicated that. You said, okay, well, you're sitting there. No, you said collective responsibility. Cabinet decisions. Not for every minister. I don't know. I'm not clear. No. I'm not trying to do anything.
The chair recognizes the honourable member, Sister Sanaz.
The discussion that's happening now is fairly dangerous because the honourable member for Engleton appears to be trying to read into the record something that was said by a member while sitting, which is not part of the record. She, as a senior member, knows better than to try and change the Hansard or the recordings of the House by doing that.
Honourable member, resume your seat a moment.
You junior to me, man.
The chair recognizes the honourable member for Angleston.
Thank you, Speaker. No, Mr. Speaker, I was just responding. It was a very provocative statement, but it was a provocative statement. But as was pointed out, the member was seated, and so it should not form part of the record, Mr. Speaker. And so I would withdraw that allusion to the Cabinet making a decision, Speaker. So, Speaker, that's all I want to do. I want the record to reflect. I would not wish the impression to be given that I am disrespectful to the chair or that I am some, well, I don't know. I don't want to put a color on it. I just want the record to reflect, Mr. Speaker, that I was, that I was making an assertion. You asked me to withdraw it. I did not withdraw it, and you struck it from the record, Mr. Speaker. That happens almost routinely in this Parliament, and I don't know if all of a sudden it became something very different, Mr. Speaker. That happens routinely where if a member refuses, does not withdraw, then the chair has a remedy which is absolute and unquestionable, and that's to strike it from the record, Mr. Speaker. And that is what the chair did, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable member, now that you have made your contribution, let me just say that the chair is trying to uphold the rules of this Parliament. and the chair exercises his discretion to determine whether statements made by any member is within the rules of conduct within this parliament. And the chair was of the view when we last met, when the chair, having not made a ruling, having not made a request for any member to get to their feet and state, even as the Hansard record is reflecting, that the chair is free to do whatever it may or wishes to. In the estimation of the chair, that is a disrespectful remark to make to the chair. What I also found very disrespectful on that occasion is, despite the rule which indicates that the chair should be heard in silence, the member for Angleton repeatedly intervened while the chair was making remarks. So much so that it was necessary for the chair to point out to the member that the chair must be heard in silence on more than one occasion, and also that it was difficult for me as the presiding officer to not hear the comments that are being directed at the chair, even from the seat, while you're not on your feet. And as a senior member of this parliament, you are fully aware that the Hansard record would normally not reflect any statement made while you are on your seat. So, I took the opportunity to order the records of the proceeding from ZNS to make certain that what was said, whether it was recorded in the Hansard record or not, is according to the rules of this parliament, and with respect to broadcasting, is indeed Rule 89, which states that the recordings are the dignified, accurate, and consistent image of the House. And so, when I examine these tapes on numerous occasions, the chair had reason to direct comments to the member for Angleton, who consistently breached the rules with respect to listening to the chair in silence. No request was ever made for the member by the chair to withdraw the remarks. The member for Elizabeth intervened and pointed out to the chair that there was a specific remark with respect to the political motivation that led to the termination of the two individuals indicated by you. And the chair's response was that the member, our minister, was in his right to bring to the attention of the chair any statement or language that he felt was an abuse of the process. Now, if we examine Erskine May on page 396, most certainly, Honorable member, have your seat. No, I'm not going to let you speak afterwards. What I'm doing is clarifying this matter. Honorable member, my tolerance is running out with you. Now, have your seat. Have your seat. You entered my chambers this morning, and you made inquiries of me, and I gave you what I was about to read now, and I allowed you to read it for yourself. You didn't ask for a copy at that time. Have your seat. Have your seat. Now, on page 96, rights of members to direct attention of the chair to supposed breaches of order. Erskine May says this: it is the duty of the speaker to intervene and preserve order, though he may refrain from intervening if he thinks it unnecessary to do so. If he does not intervene, however, whether for the above reason or because he has not perceived that a breach of order has been committed, it is the right of any member who thinks that such a breach has been committed to rise to his place, interrupting any member who may be speaking, and direct the attention of the chair to the matter. And that is simply the position that the chair was indicating. The chair may have said that the minister has a right, but that right is a broad right to every single member. Every member in this parliament has the right to bring to the attention of the chair any statement or language that he feels is in breach of the rules. And so I honored the member for Elizabeth who brought that matter to the attention of the chair. It didn't matter whether that member is a minister or not. The rules are clear. Any member has that right. Secondly, there was an earlier occasion in this parliament on June 23rd when the member for Angleton, interestingly, raised an issue with the member for Fort Charlotte during his contribution. And the minutes, the member for Angleton was not a minister at the time. The member was simply a member. And the House and this Parliament is not a respecter of persons with regard to whether they are ministers or not. That is why we refer to ourselves as honorable members. Everybody having equal footing. And so, you, member for Angleton at that time, took issue, not being a minister at the time, with the statement for the member of Fort Charlotte. And your request at that time, as the member for Angleton, quoted by the Hansard, I am asking the member, that is the member for Fort Charlotte, to either substantiate or withdraw. It is a simple matter, Mr. Speaker, and the Auditor General report is right in this Parliament. He ain't got to wait long. He could find it, and I want him to find it, or find the auditor report, which says $48 million went missing from road traffic. Until then, Mr. Speaker, I am asking him to withdraw, and it ought to be expunged from the record. Now, in the view of the chair, that request by the honorable member for Angleston was no different from the request being made by the member for Elizabeth. And in the process, the member for Fort Charlotte, with not being able to substantiate or to produce the evidence or proof at the time, did the honorable thing and withdrew his remarks. But on the other hand, when the request was made in our last sitting to the member for Angleston, the member for Angleston refused to withdraw the remark, did not substantiate the remark, did not produce any evidence for the remark, did not prove the remark, but refused to withdraw the remark. And so the chair took the position that the remark should be expunged from the record because the remarks were of, within the determination of the chair, were of a broad nature because the remarks accused members of the government side of engaging in termination of persons for political reasons. And so the chair determined that that remark should be expunged from the record. Now, honorable member, I'm not finished. Now, as it relates to Rule 88, which can be found on page 72, if a statement is not withdrawn, it may be expunged by order of the Speaker. And so the Speaker uses his discretion to expunge from the record an unsubstantiated statement. Now, I also want to take a look because I happen to be a person scientifically trained and also trained in observational analysis. And I've been examining these interventions and certain requests for hands of records and discovered a pattern where the member for Angleston continuously rises on points of order, makes allegations and assertions that a member has made a statement, and on each and every occasion that I've been able to examine to this point, the member, in fact, based on the hands of the record, did not make the statement. And honorable member, have your seat. I advised you when you came in my chamber that if you open this matter, I'm not being unfair to you. Have your seat. These are the records of the Parliament. Honorable member for Cat Island, the chair recognizes you.
Thank you very much.
I'll start from where you just ended. And that is, Mr. Speaker, you have just accused the member of Angliston, basically, in effect, but you're accusing her of not telling the truth or misleading this parliament.
I never said any such thing.
I know.
Honorable member, honorable member, honorable member, honorable member.
Please. Mr. Speaker.
Let him lay it on the table.
Mr. Speaker.
Lay it on the table.
I don't mind you responding to me, but if I could just make, if I could establish what I'm saying, then if you disagree, I don't have a problem with that. But at least let me establish the point I'm making.
Well, honorable member, I am prepared to allow you to establish the point you are making.
Disagree?
No, I don't want to disagree. I want you to speak.
Thank you very much.
To the truth of what I'm saying.
Mr. Speaker, what you
don't say that I said something which I didn't say.
I did not say that you said. I said, Mr. Speaker, from what you said. I said from what you said, from what you would have said. Right? From what you have said. Right? What you have said, Mr. Speaker, what you said is that you have examined a pattern of behavior on the part of the member for Angliston.
Yes.
That as a result of that, your discoveries suggest that every time she rose on a point of order, not to what some member may have said, it was not correct. Is that not what you said?
Honorable member, I said that I examined these records.
Right.
And the records that I have examined show a pattern.
Yes. And that pattern.
And that pattern
yes.
is that assertions and allegations are made.
Yes.
And the Hansard record have shown that on those occasions, the allegation and assertions were not founded. They were unfounded.
Right. So that's what I'm saying. And what I'm suggesting is, what I'm saying, Mr. Speaker, right? What you have done, Mr. Speaker, what you have done is you have on your own motion conducted an inquiry relating to this member without giving the member an opportunity to be a part of that inquiry, and then making a finding that is adverse to her in the context that you have found that she has made assertions and allegations that you determine are unfounded without even giving her the opportunity. How could that be fair?
No.
How could you, Mr. Speaker,
honorable,
determine that it's fair?
Honorable member.
Mr. Speaker,
honorable member.
May I repeat what I would ask you, sir? May I repeat? You have embarked on your own motion.
No.
On an inquiry.
That is incorrect.
Mr. Speaker, you said that you went and looked at the Hansard, and you determined from the Hansard that assertions made by, was the member aware that you were going on embarking along that route? No, she wasn't.
Honorable member, resume your seat so I can continue. Honorable member, the member for Angliston made a request for a report of the Hansard to be produced for this morning's hearing. The custom is that whenever a member requests a copy of the Hansard, the Speaker receives a copy. When I examined what the member had requested, only the morning session was transcribed. So the Speaker requested that both the morning and afternoon sessions be transcribed so that we can have a complete picture and there wouldn't be any material non-disclosure. So both sessions were requested, and the Speaker took it upon himself to also request a copy of the video recordings of the session. Because I am new here, I don't know who is who, and I don't trust people until they earn my trust. And so that is might be a serious thing to say, but that is the position of the chair. So I requested a copy of the recordings because I did not want to come to this parliament and make assertions, for example, that the member interrupted the speaker on multiple occasions unless I was satisfied that that was true. So the member initiated the investigation with respect to the Hansard records. Honorable member, resume your seat. Resume your seat, honorable member. Resume your seat. I'm not finished. You are in breach.
To ensure that you put yourself on the right track, please.
I am on the right track, honorable member.
No, sir.
Have your seat. Have your seat, honorable member. Honorable member, please have your seat. Have your seat. Have your seat. Honorable member, have your seat. It is the order. It is the order of the chair that all comments made by the honorable member for Cat Island, Rumpke, and San Salvador, without being recognized by the chair, the recent comments, be expunged from the record. Now, honorable member, have your seat.
You cannot assail this member so unfairly. You're making conclusions about her, going embarking on your own separate inquiry. Wrong. That's wrong.
Honorable.
You are abusing in this parliament. I've made allegations unfounded, and just because you went and talking with her, she led you to look at Hansard report. Finish making your point. Nothing else. She was concerned about how you characterize her as a member of this house. You characterize her as someone who
honorable member, have your seat. Resume your seat. You are not recognized by the chair. Further order by the chair. All the statements made by the honorable member for Cat Island, Rumpke, and San Salvador on his feet are expunged from the record. You do not get to your feet and speak unless the chair recognizes you. We are going to function in this parliament according to the rules. And honorable member for Cat Island, Rumpke, and San Salvador, and the honorable member for Angleston, if you do not want to abide by the rules, you can withdraw from the parliament.
But you don't make the rules on the fly. You don't make the rules on the fly.
Honorable member, when you rise, honorable member, the rules are clear. We're going to go according to the rules. When you rise, you wait for the recognition of the chair. You don't get up on your feet and begin to speak. Okay. Now, having said that, you're still speaking. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Angleston.
Thank you, Speaker. Speaker, I am beyond dumbfounded what I've just heard, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable member, what are you on? On a point of order?
I'm on Mr. Speaker, I am on a point of privilege, really, because the Speaker has just indicated that he's a scientist.
State your point of privilege.
My point of privilege, Mr. Speaker, is that you have the member, the Speaker, I don't even know this, I'm dumbfounded, Speaker. The Speaker has accused me of coming to this Parliament with regularity, making assertions about other members, that the Speaker has now engaged on an investigative track and has formed a conclusion that I, on each occasion, have misrepresented what that member has said in this Parliament, and that you see a pattern, I think you use the language, a pattern, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, I am completely taken aback, and I am asking, Mr. Speaker, I feel, Mr. Speaker, it is quite abusive, that what you have just described, because it is something I was in your chambers. I shared with you openly what I intended to raise. You sat there, I'm Speaker, no doubt listening. You came in, you talked about tapes which were not disclosed to me in that meeting, Mr. Speaker, and I didn't think I'd have to disclose the meeting. You did not disclose these tapes that I guess you were just sitting there waiting for me to come in this Parliament, and I would use the language, ambush me. I've not heard the tapes. No, that's what it is. I've not heard the tapes. I don't know what these tapes say. And as Mr. Speaker, and finally, Mr. Speaker, you have indicated, I'm quite shocked, Mr. Speaker, that you have singled out this member who represents the good people of Angleston. You have singled out this member in a way in which you have gone to look at the Hansard in terms of every time this member requested. I'm sure I'm not the only member in this Parliament who's requested the Hansard, but you have gone on a specific, language is used. You have targeted me, Mr. Speaker. You have targeted me by going into the record of the Hansard.
Honorable member.
You have targeted me.
Honorable member.
You have targeted me, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable member, resume your seat. Resume your seat.
Targeted the chair on many occasions.
First of all, honorable member, resume your seat. Honorable member for Angleston, let me direct this comment directly to you. Sometimes in life, you have to understand that to every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. Honorable member, have your seat. The member for Angleston, Glennis Hannah Martin, is named by this chair. And all sympathizers who want to support can behave accordingly. A decision. Yeah. A decision on the period of suspension of the member for Angleston will be determined, and this Parliament will be informed. Sergeant at Arms, you are hereby notified that the member for Angleston is hereby suspended from this Parliament, and that the member is not entitled to enter the precincts of this Parliament until otherwise determined by this House and the Chair. At this time, we will continue the order of business of the House. Statements and communications by ministers. The Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Kalani.
Something you said is in keeping with the laws of business and the laws of medicine. As a gynecologist, I was told, common teaching, that every woman is pregnant until proven otherwise. And that way you tend not to miss any diagnosis. But, Mr. Speaker, I wish to report to the House on my recent visit to the state of Texas in the United States of America. We pledge transparency and accountability in overseas travels by ministers of the government. This communication is in keeping with this pledge. We will also advise the public on the cost of such travel. I received an invitation last year from Governor Greg Abbott to visit Texas. We agreed that the visit would take place in January 2018. On the 21st of January 2018, I led a delegation to Texas accompanied by Minister Darren Henfield, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Senator Kwesi Thompson, Minister of State for Grand Bahama, the Honorable Cornelius A. Smith, non-resident ambassador-designate to Central American states and former ambassador to the United States, OAS, and Mexico. Mr. Joshua Sayers, senior policy advisor in the office of the Prime Minister and former ambassador to the United States, Mexico, and the OAS. The delegation included media relations and security personnel. We were joined in Texas by His Excellency Mr. Sidney Colley, our ambassador to the United States of America, Mrs. Linda Mackey, Consul General in Miami, in whose jurisdiction the state of Texas falls, and Mr. Lyndon Rose, our honorary consul in Houston. Mr. Speaker, let me briefly highlight a few details on the state of Texas and why it holds great promise as a potential source of investment for the Bahamas. Texas is the second largest economy in the United States and the 10th largest in the world. It has the second largest population after the state of California. It has the second largest port in the United States and the 6th largest in the world. It is the home of the 54 companies of the Fortune 500 list. Texas is a leader in the field of education. It is one of the major hubs in the United States for the development of computer component systems and information infrastructure. Texas is a global leader in the energy industry. It is a leader in alternative energy sources, producing wind power and solar, two viable potential sources of renewable energy for the Bahamas. Mr. Speaker, our national flag carrier, Bahamas Air, commenced its inaugural flight to Houston in November of last year. Also of note, approximately 200 Bahamians attend colleges and universities in Texas, and a number of Bahamians reside
in that state. The Bahamas is generating significant investment interest from businesses and individuals in Texas. A number of Texans have second homes in the Bahamas, and a number of others have expressed interest in second homes in the country. Of note, the Bahamas enjoys a good reputation among the potential investors and friends of the Bahamas that we met. Mr. Speaker, on the 22nd of January 2018, I met with the Honorable Gregory Abbott, Governor of Texas, at the Governor's Mansion in Austin, the state's capital. We discussed and shared views on a number of topics, including technology, education, alternative energy, investments, economic development, and health care. We have agreed to further discussions on these and other matters. Governor Abbott is no stranger to the Bahamas. Having visited some years ago, I extended an invitation to him for a return visit to the Bahamas. Speaker, my delegation also had a constructive meeting with the Austin Technology Council, Texas Association of Business Partner Companies, on the 22nd of January 2018. In my presentation, I highlighted the benefits of investing in the Bahamas, particularly Grand Bahama. Members would recall that Grand Bahama held its first technology conference last year. A number of representatives from major companies overseas attended. Our meeting with this group built upon that initiative. And during our visit to Texas, we also met with Dell, a leading American computer technology company. We engaged in wide-ranging discussions with these executives. We were given a tour of their Customer Solution Center. I was pleased with the keen interest shown in the Bahamas, and we will follow up on those discussions. Mr. Speaker, on the 23rd of January, we visited Houston, where we were guests at several events, including a reception attended by a number of business leaders, investors, and friends of the Bahamas. These events afforded an opportunity for our delegation to engage in discussions with potential investors, including some who had previously attempted to invest in the Bahamas. My delegation met with the executives of the Port of Houston, which, as I previously mentioned, is the second largest port in the United States. We discussed collaboration interests between the Port of Grand Bahama in a number of areas, including training and management. I am quite hopeful that this visit will lead to the establishment of relations between the two ports. While in Houston, we also met Mayor Sylvester Turner and Tillman Fertitta, the owner of the Houston Rockets, George Foreman, former heavyweight boxing champion. Mr. Speaker, in Houston, we met with some of the Bahamian community at a reception attended by approximately 300 guests. In my address at the reception, I reported on developments in the Bahamas undertaken by my government. I invited the guests, including members of the diaspora, to participate in the development of our Bahamas. My address is attached to this communication, Mr. Speaker. So this communication I will have both addresses attached. Yes. The address at the diaspora and the address at the Texas business community. And at the end, Mr. Speaker, I will also table the cost of travel expenses. I was truly inspired by their enthusiasm and commitment to our beloved country. Our diaspora is a source of great energy and possibility for the Bahamas. During my visit, I enjoyed the privilege of meeting Pastor Joel Osteen of Lakewood Church. Pastor Osteen had been a source of inspiration to many Bahamians over the years, and an invitation was extended to him. I must point out, Mr. Speaker, that Pastor Osteen had expressed a keen interest in visiting the Bahamas, and I mentioned to him that our stadium that can hold as much as 15,000 would be able to accommodate him and those thousands that follow him. And I would hand this information over to Ministry of Tourism so that they can follow up. However, we've already sent a communication to the various individuals that we've met, thanking them for our invitation. And Mr. Speaker, it's my intention to continue these structured and strategic overseas visits, the cost of which will be made public. I have already foreshadowed investment promotion missions overseas to various countries and regions. We will especially welcome the private sector as partners in these missions. These travels are designed to attract high-quality investments to our country, as well as engage our diaspora in the development of our country. A major theme of our newly designed promotion is that the Bahamas is an archipelago of possibilities, suggesting the diversity of the islands of the Bahamas and the diversification of investment possibilities ranging from tourism to financial services to technology to aquaculture to renewable energy to other emerging industries. A new Bahamas is emerging, Mr. Speaker, that is open for business. Mr. Speaker, just as we are being prudent with our public finances in general, these investment and promotion trips must be financially justifiable and conducted in a financially responsible manner. Our aim is to promote a new Bahamas open to investment with joint partnership with Bahamians and streamlined processes for investors, including potential investors from the diaspora. We also want investors to know that our approval processes are transparent and free of corrupt practices by politicians and public officials, which may increase the cost and retard the ease of doing business. Approvals will be based on merit and not on benefits for those seeking a certain cut or percentage from the potential investors in order to receive approvals. Speaker, the Bahamian people were able to see firsthand through live stream the work of our delegation during the trip to Texas. Additionally, I held a press conference upon my return on the 24th of January to brief the press on our visit. And I wish to thank all those who made this visit a success, a visit which holds tremendous promise for investment, growth, and opportunity. Mr. Speaker, I thank you very much. At this time, I'd like to table my speech made at the diaspora. I'd also like to table, Mr. Speaker, the remarks made to the Texas business community. And I'd also like to table, so that the press need not ask me, a copy of travel expenses. So Travis, you will have it all in your hand. Speaker. This is all about transparency. But Speaker, while I'm on my feet, I would like to firstly thank Mr. Lyndon Rose, the Honorary Consul to Texas, whom I thought did an outstanding job in setting up most, if not all, of the meetings. And of course, we had quite a number of other meetings set up. And Mr. Speaker, it's unfortunate that he is not paid, because for the amount of work, energy, and drive he had displayed in assisting and helping the Bahamian community, I don't think we can even pay him for that amount of work he's done.
We can. Thank you.
And just before I sit, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to note, I want to send condolence to the family of Mr. Hartman Munker, 103-year-old gentleman in Cat Island, probably the oldest individual in the Bahamas. We have someone older than 103? Jesus Christ. And Mr. Munker is 103 years old, passed away yesterday, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to send condolence to his family, as they've made great contribution to our Bahama land. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Order that the documents be brought up. Order that the documents lie on the table. Further statements and communication by ministers. The Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for North Abaco.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to communicate to this House on the recent fire in the unregulated community of the Mud in central Abaco. Mr. Speaker, but as I am wont to do, I firstly want to give God thanks for the privilege of being in this place, and to say publicly again that it is in Him that we live, breathe, move, and have our very being. I'd also like to thank the people of North Abaco for the confidence that they have reposed in me. Mr. Speaker, on Sunday, the 28th of January, 2018, fire engulfed the southeastern section of the unregulated development community of the Mud in central Abaco, resulting in the reported destruction of some 55 structures and the displacement of 170 residents. The Department of Social Services in Abaco reported that of the 170 persons displaced, only 26 had taken advantage of the temporary shelter provided by the local congregation of Mount Olive Church of God in Marsh Harbor. It is believed that the others found sanctuary with family members and friends within the community and the surrounding area. You know, Mr. Speaker, by the grace of God, there were no injuries or loss of life. We are indebted to the generosity of Pastor Wesley Presnell for his congregation's help in providing shelter for those in need. Mr. Speaker, I do wish on behalf of the government of the Bahamas to publicly thank those persons who worked assiduously to bring the fire under control and to attend to those in need in the aftermath. These include, but by no means limited to, the Department of Local Government, the local disaster management team, the Royal Bahamas Police and Defense Forces, the Abaco Voluntary Fire Services, the Department of Social Services, and the Red Cross. Mr. Speaker, Recognizing the clear and present danger that these unregulated developments pose to the safety and well-being of those who live in them and the broader Bahamian society, and well ahead of Sunday's near catastrophic event in the mud on last Sunday morning, the Cabinet of the Bahamas approved the formation of a select cabinet committee to remediate the issue of this blight on our national landscape. The committee is led by the Honorable Minister of Labor, Senator Dion Fowlkes, and includes the Ministry of Housing and the Environment, the Ministry of Social Services and Urban Development, the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of National Security, the Office of the Attorney General and Legal Affairs, and the Ministry of Agriculture and Fisheries. Among other things, this sectoral, multi-ministry, multi-agency approach taken by the government of the Bahamas anticipates the production of a comprehensive report with recommendations to have unregulated communities like the mud removed from the Bahamian landscape in an orderly, well-considered, and humane manner. Mr. Speaker, accordingly, the government will take a systematic and incremental approach to addressing the mud, and by extension, other such unregulated communities throughout our country. In the present case, the impacted area will be cleaned and secured to prevent any rebuilding therein. Moreover, aerial photography by drones will be employed to determine existing structures so that any new buildings will be immediately recognized and addressed. Additionally, a comprehensive assessment of the boundaries will be undertaken to ascertain ownership of the land in question and to effect sustained corrective measures so as to prevent any further unregulated developments. Mr. Speaker, it is no secret that the issue of unregulated communities present myriad complexities which are particularly exposed in the light of events such as the fire of Sunday past. The health, social, and other negative implications associated with unregulated communities in the Bahamas are simply intolerable, and as such, these enclaves must be urgently addressed. On behalf of my colleague, Member of Parliament for South and Central Abaco, the Honorable James Albury, Parliamentary Secretary in the Office of the Prime Minister, whose leadership during the event was commendable, and the people of Central Abaco, I wish to thank the Honorable Prime Minister for the urgency placed on remediating the situation in the mud, which was evidenced by his visit, accompanied by cabinet colleagues and other government officials, to the impacted site on Monday. Mr. Speaker, I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member.
Taking my seat, please permit me to extend condolences to the family of C.J. Edgecombe, who lost his life violently in our community. Not that one. 2 weeks ago. And to admonish our young men in the Bahamas to adhere to all of their Christian principles and upbringing as we try to make our way in our Bahamian community. I would also like to say to the family of James Edgecombe that our prayers are still with him as we laid him to rest on Saturday past in Cooperstown. To his children and his siblings, we want them to be assured of our prayers. Mr. Speaker, also on behalf of the people of North Abaco, I would like to thank the Prime Minister for his land initiative announced on Monday night, which says to us in Abaco and throughout these family of islands that land will be made available with utility intact, that our people that our people may be able to achieve affordable housing. And it is hoped, Mr. Speaker, that this initiative will truly drive this thing that we have been after in this country for many, many years, this Back to the Island initiative, where people like myself, who's from the island of Abaco, would be able to go back and afford a second home. Mr. Speaker, I thank you.
Thank you, honourable member. Order that the communication be brought up. Order that the document do lie on the table. Further statements and communications by ministers. The chair recognizes the honourable member for Marathon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Before I begin, I too, in watching the recent exchanges, Mr. Speaker, I am reminded when the book of Job declares that the life of man upon this earth is as war. That being said, Mr. Speaker, I too wish to thank Almighty God for his grace and his mercy. It indeed endures forever. Mr. Speaker, again, I thank you for this opportunity to report to the Bahamian people on the recent fire that occurred at the New Providence Sanitary Landfill, and of course to update them on the progress of the request for proposals that was set in motion. Before I begin, Mr. Speaker, let me thank the wonderful people of Marathon for their continued support, for which I'm eternally grateful. I pledge to always serve resolutely in this honorable House, to act on their behalf for our beloved country, the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Mr. Speaker, an American politician, Mr. Bill Haslam, once said, we have to be about finding long-term solutions to our biggest challenges, without contestation and without fear of contradiction. It is agreed by most Bahamians that the issues faced at the New Providence Sanitary Landfill is one of the most vexing problems our nation has faced in recent years. Mr. Speaker, now is not the time for reach for the low-hanging fruit or to bask in a series of short-term solutions that lead us right back to square one. Now is the time to have the courage to carry out the work required to bring lasting change that affects and impacts the lives of all involved. In keeping with this philosophy, Mr. Speaker, the Minnis administration, led by the Ministry of Environment and Housing, has been feverishly working to implement the long-term strategy that would lead to literally breaking up or deconstructing the present structure at the New Providence Sanitary Landfill and correcting or remediating the problems that lie therein. The ultimate goal is to have the site operated in a manner that is congruent with international standards for a sanitary landfill. Following the government's directive, Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of Environment and Housing is mandated to find an investor that will manage services for the deconstruction and remediation of the site. It is expected, Mr. Speaker, that that entity would provide the requisite financing needed to sustain operations, technical support in all project phases from inception to construction, a plan to deconstruct and remediate the landfill facility, and an overall system that will be more attractive while developing a sustainable system of operation. The potential investor, Mr. Speaker, will be responsible for carrying out the following assignments at the landfill: financing waste management operations, operation of the landfill site, sustaining waste management upgrades and extending coverage to mitigate fires and reduce the rodent population, generation of revenue from waste management services, and stakeholder relationship management. Mr. Speaker, you would recall that a press statement was released on the 1st of June 2017 that conveyed the short and long-term goals of the government of the Bahamas to address the challenges and remediate the landfill. As a part of the long-term goal to fix the New Providence sanitary landfill, it was agreed to issue a new RFP, or request for proposal, for the management of the entire site. Mr. Speaker, in a press conference in November of last year, I advised the Bahamian public that on the 16th of November 2017, the expressions of interest for the potential investment and management services relating to the deconstruction and remediation of the New Providence sanitary landfill would be released. This was published in the daily newspapers. The closing date was announced as the 15th of December 2017. The submissions were opened at the tenders board at the Ministry of Finance on the 3rd of January 2018. A total of 18 companies expressed interest in investing in the New Providence sanitary landfill. Mr. Speaker, the expression of interest evaluation team met, finished their meetings, and they discussed the submissions, and each candidate was graded on the capacity to address the concerns at the landfill, the financial strength to accomplish the same, and prior experience in performing work. 7 companies, Mr. Speaker, were shortlisted, and letters will be issued to the successful and unsuccessful participants in the expression of interest by the end of this week. Mr. Speaker, those successful candidates will receive a copy of the request for proposal for the potential investment request for proposal for the potential investment and management services relating to the deconstruction, remediation, and operation of the New Providence sanitary landfill during the 5th to the 9th of February 2018. They will also be required to pay a non-refundable registration fee of $10,000 and are expected to submit proposals to the tenders board at the Ministry of Finance by the 31st of March 2018. The proposals will then be scrutinized by the RFP evaluation team, and a preferred bidder would be selected by May 2018. Mr. Speaker, after informing the government of the Bahamas of the results, I shall revert to the Bahamian people to announce the firm selected, and we intend to enter into an agreement to manage, deconstruct, operate the operations at the New Providence sanitary landfill. This is the long-term solution. But, Mr. Speaker, even though those events were in train, unfortunately, I am compelled to report on yet another incident that recently occurred at the landfill. Mr. Speaker, I wish to bring attention to the Bahamian public that at 4:30 p.m. on Saturday, the 27th of January 2018, a fire broke out at the New Providence sanitary landfill. The fire was mainly confined in the household waste section of the active tipping area, which is located in the southeast portion of the site. Mr. Speaker, on close examination, there appeared to be 2 separate fires, one approximately 50 by 100 feet and the other 50 by 200 feet. In all, the fire covered approximately 20% of the southeast corner of the household section of the active tipping area of the landfill. With winds about 25 knots at 5 p.m. on Saturday afternoon, the fire spread into the area designated for the disposal of construction and demolition waste. The fire team from the Royal Bahamas Police Force and the Department of Environmental Health Services, along with the assistance of private water trucks, were able to contain most of the blaze throughout Saturday night. This was accomplished with ongoing coverage and compaction of the waste to prevent subterranean ignition. However, containment of the blaze proved challenging due to limited firefighting resources and the unusually high winds. Mr. Speaker, work continued on Sunday, mostly in the construction and demolition waste area, where tractors and excavators and water trucks worked in tandem to extinguish the remaining blaze and reduce the danger to life and property of the surrounding residents. At approximately 12 noon on Sunday, the 28th of January 2018, the wind subsided to about 20 knots. This condition generated a lot of white smoke, which greatly affected the residents in the neighboring areas. It was forecasted that the winds would subside by Monday, and residents felt the effects of this as there was a decrease in the amount of smoke generated from the site. Mr. Speaker, once the needed resources are provided and the equipment is functioning as planned, it is anticipated that the fire will be fully extinguished by the end of the week. And I have just been advised that the household waste section has been fully extinguished at this point. The Royal Bahamas Police Force and Department of Environmental Health Services team will continue to wet and cover as a part of the strategy to remediate the remaining issues at the site. Additionally, Mr. Speaker, the government has been advised that in order to fight these fires successfully and in a timely manner, it is imperative that DHS continually has the following equipment on hand: mobile and stationary firefighting equipment with sufficient fire hoses, adequate mobile and stationary lighting, D8 payloaders, fill trucks, and landfill compactors, adequate cover material, and transportation for staff to properly carry out surveillance. As the government continues to shunt the resources to the landfill to deal with this vexing problem, my ministry is implementing and focused on continuing and to finish off the long-term strategy to fully resolve this issue at the landfill. Mr. Speaker, Pope John Paul II once said that the earth will not continue to offer its harvest except with faithful stewardship. We cannot say we love the land and then take steps to destroy it and destroy its use for future generations. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, as long as the constituents of Marathon permit me to be installed in this place, I shall remain the humble environmental steward and advocate on behalf of this beautiful nation, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, before I take my seat, I would like, with your leave, to make mention of just one or two items. Firstly, this issue of landfill fires is a vexing issue, not just for the Bahamas, but throughout the region. And in doing some research on this, I found out that Jamaica experiences 1 to 2 landfill fires a year, and St. Martin had a whopping 19 dump fires in 2016. But all of that is of no consequence to the residents that are surrounding, that surround the current New Providence sanitary landfill. And I want to assure them of the government's singular determination to resolve this issue once and for all on behalf of the Bahamian people. Mr. Speaker, I also would like to take this opportunity to extend birthday greetings to members of the constituency of Marathon, Mr. Brian Collins, Justin Medayera, and Vincent White. Happy birthday, guys. I'd also, Mr. Speaker, wish to extend sincere condolences to the family and friends of the late Daphne Stiles, who passed away before Christmas. With that being said, Mr. Speaker, I take my seat.
Order that the communication be brought up. Order that the communication do lie on the table. Further statements and communications by ministers. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Bamboo Town.
There are none, Mr. Speaker.
Communications by the clerk. Messages from the Governor General. Messages from the Senate. Motions for leave of absence and leave to resign seat. And new writs. Presentation of petitions. Presentation of reports of committees. Adoption of reports of committees. First reading of bills. The chair recognizes the honorable member for East Grand Bahama.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I wish to withdraw. I have withdrawn a bill for the Financial Transaction Reporting Bill 2018 and replace it with a new bill.
Honorable member, in the absence of the official opposition, did you receive the consent of?
The consent of the official opposition who has exited the building. We were not even asking for unanimous consent on the issue, but we did receive their consent to pull the bill and to lay these new bills.
So we can have it. There we have it. So yes, Mr. Speaker, we have the consent.
Yes, continue, honorable member.
So we withdraw the old bill and lay this new bill, Mr. Speaker.
The new bill being presented is the Financial Transactions Reporting Bill 2018.
Correct.
Order that this new bill do lie on the table and order that it be read for the first time. The bill be read for the first time.
A bill for an act to repeal and replace the Financial Transaction Reporting Act and for matters connected thereto.
For the first reading of bills.
I would like to withdraw a bill that's been tabled, a bill for an act to consolidate the strengthening measures to recover the proceeds and instrumentalities of crime and to combat identified risk, and to replace it with a new bill, the Proceeds of Crime Bill 2018.
And likewise, you have received
We have consent.
the consent.
Yes.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Bamboo Town.
Again, we did receive the consent of the official opposition, though, again, in this regard, we do not need the unanimous consent of the House to be able to do what we're doing, because we're not seeking to debate those bills today. We will come back next week and debate both bills in the House.
The replacement bill is a bill for an act to consolidate and strengthen measures to recover the proceeds and instrumentalities of crime and to combat identified risks. Order that the bill be read for the first time.
A bill for an act to consolidate and strengthen measures to recover the proceeds and instrumentalities of crime and to combat identified risks.
For the first reading of bills, the chair recognizes the honorable member for Bamboo Town.
Mr. Speaker, there are no further first readings.
Second readings and committal of bills. The chair recognizes the honorable member for East Grand Bahama.
Mr. Speaker, You're gonna break for this one? You're gonna break for lunch or are you gonna? Oh, it's 12. Oh, I'm sorry. Jeez. Looking at the clock up there. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise on behalf of the people of East Grand Bahama to make a contribution to the Credit Reporting Bill 2016 and the Credit Reporting Regulations 2016, which we both delayed today. Mr. Speaker, before I begin my substantive contribution, I would like to join with the thousands of Bahamians who expressed empathy with the people of the Mud, Marsh Harbor, Abaco, and those who have lost their homes and personal belongings in that horrific blaze this week. Indeed, the Prime Minister and colleagues have visited residents and community there to view for themselves the destruction and to gather information that will assist with relief efforts already underway and those that will be mounted in the coming days. And of course, you would have heard a communication from the member for North Abaco earlier. Unlike some, Mr. Speaker, who sought to use this incident for political mileage, this government is about action and real plans to correct years of neglect by the side opposite in dealing with unregulated communities and immigration policy. Those entitled to stay in the Bahamas will be afforded the opportunity to live in decent surroundings, conducive and in standards in keeping with the Bahamian community. Mr. Speaker, the exercise leading up to the Credit Reporting Bill was thorough and included consultations with relevant stakeholders. The principles included in the bill conform to international best practices underlying credit reporting systems. As you will see as I go through the provisions of the bill, care has been taken to ensure that the rights of consumers will be protected through appropriate oversight and an appeals process, which is key to ensuring the integrity of the system. Mr. Speaker, as background to the bill, the Bahamas Credit Bureau project was launched by the Central Bank of the Bahamas in 2010 for the purposes of establishing a national credit reporting system in the Bahamas, inclusive of a credit bureau. This followed on extensive dialogue with the government, the commercial banks, and other private sector stakeholders, the World Bank, and the International Financial Corporation, with assistance from the Caribbean Regional Technical Assistance Center, better known as CARTAC. It's an IMF agency, which carried out an assessment in February 2010 to determine whether or not the Bahamas' existing regime could fully support a functioning credit reporting system. The IFC analysis identified weaknesses in the existing business and regulatory infrastructure for credit reporting in the jurisdiction and set out strategies for strengthening the regulatory and business underpinnings required to support a credit bureau, inclusive of the introduction of credit reporting legislation as we're doing today. The IFC, in consultation with the central bank, produced a draft credit reporting bill and the accompanying regulations, which have been reviewed by a legal working group established to review the proposed legislative framework for the credit reporting system. The legal working group comprised of representatives from institutions that provide credit, such as banks and credit unions, insurance companies, money lenders, and utilities. The bills and regulations were also reviewed by the Data Protection Commissioner and the Attorney General's Office prior to being issued for public consultation in September 2014. Since then, the bill and regulations have been further revised based on internal reviews by the central bank and is now finally being presented for debate and acceptance in this honorable House. Mr. Speaker, credit bureaus collect information from lenders and other sources on a borrower's credit and bill-paying history, validates the information, and then provides the information to participating lenders by way of a credit report. Creditors then utilize these reports to determine whether or not to grant loans or extend credit, and at what interest rate. Typical clients or subscribers of credit bureaus includes banks, mortgage lenders, credit companies, and other financial companies. Credit bureaus are generally regarded as essential elements of a country's financial infrastructure, supportive of the overall objective of stability and economic growth, and with benefits to both lender and borrowers as they offer objective data upon which to make sound credit or borrowing decisions. Mr. Speaker, as we are aware, currently the Bahamas has extremely high loan arrears, which approaches some 15.6% of banks' private loan portfolios. The non-accrual component is almost 10% of total loans. Non-accrual meaning that the loans are so bad they stop accruing the interest on it because they can't collect the principal, they can't collect the interest either. So they just stop accruing. The high volume of loan consolidation activity since the recent economic crisis demonstrated that persons have exceeded prudent debt servicing levels and that key lenders do not have full information when extending credit. We are all painfully aware of the mortgage fallout at Bank of the Bahamas, which resulted in the creation of Resolve Corporation Limited to relieve that bank's balance sheet of delinquent loans, which was partially created by poor credit policies and other influencing factors, but is also contributed to by the lack of objective and reliable credit data. By providing the mechanism for credit activities to be conducted on full and relevant information, this will facilitate, among other things, a reduction in lenders' exposure to risky loans, thereby mitigating their non-performing loan rates and making the credit decision process more efficient. It will give increased access to credit and to a range of financial products by consumers on more favorable terms and at competitive interest rates, thus reducing their borrowing costs. It will give a measure of discipline on debtor behavior, thus reducing the level of consumer indebtedness and the number of non-performing loans in the financial system. And it will give the central bank enhanced capacity to monitor system risks and utilize accurate aggregate information on credit quality. Mr. Speaker, consumer loans is of particular concern because, as we know, most of our community is overburdened with consumer loans. And that has a lot to do with the fact that persons who grant credit do not have any way of checking to see whether the information that they're being told or given is accurate and that the potential borrower, creditor, is being truthful with respect to liabilities that they already have. And I know that I see it in the Ministry of Finance where people come all the time for the lenders come for what they call a code, which means that they can be in the system for automatic deductions. And I see civil servants who come for authorization for these deductions. When we look at the existing deductions, we realize that most of them are going home with nothing. I mean, some of these individuals are going home with literally $12. I had one, $12.56 at the end of the day. And that is all because we did not have a system where these creditors can look and see what obligations already exist in respect to a borrower. This system will help to alleviate that problem. Mr. Speaker, given the impact of credit on the economy, it is proposed that the central bank will have oversight responsibility for the credit reporting system, having as its goal the promotion of arrangements that are efficient and effective in satisfying the needs of various market participants and supportive of consumer rights and of the development of a fair and competitive credit market. The central bank will be responsible for licensing and supervising credit bureaus established in the country. We are advised that based on the operating experience of existing credit bureaus in the region, a sustainable credit reporting service provider needs in excess of 250,000 credit inquiries per annum. Otherwise, the capital cost of entry is too high, and the subsequent cost of individual credit reports prohibitively expensive. Given this, the IFC has recommended a hub and spoke operation model for credit bureau implementation in the Bahamas, where an existing service provider would leverage its system, or the hub, to service operations for several countries, the spokes. In this model, the information held by the credit bureau on consumers of each jurisdiction would be stored in the credit bureau's database, but on a segregated basis, with access provided to authorized persons only. Additionally, the credit bureau operator would be required to establish a physical presence in each country for the purpose of providing service to customers. The benefits of the hub and spoke approach include much lower development cost due to the redundancy of many components, such as hardware, backup, disaster recovery, trouble ticketing, maintenance, personnel training, etc. Utilization of a first-class international bureau operator, despite the small size of the participating countries. A shorter time to market, average 12 to 15 months. World-class data security as a result of economies of scale and the provider's international experience and investments. Uninterrupted, high-quality upgrades, which otherwise would be fewer, sporadic, and overdue. The ability to leverage products, technical experience, and sophisticated value-added service used in advanced markets, and service consistency in a particular cross-border region, which corresponds to ease of use, economies of scale, and system standardization for all lenders in different countries. Mr. Speaker, confidentiality provisions contained in the Banks and Trust Companies Regulation Act and the Data Protection Act currently impede the sharing of borrowers' information with third parties. To overcome this issue, the clearing bank associations was invited to draft a consent clause to permit credit providers to obtain the credit reports of their customers from the credit bureau, which may be used by lenders throughout the credit reporting sector to obtain consumer consent. The credit bureau will capture both positive and negative data, which studies have shown improves lenders' ability to predict borrowers' future payment behavior. Negative data refers to late payments, defaults, judgments, and bankruptcies. Positive data, or positive credit reporting, is more comprehensive than negative data and includes information on opened and closed credit accounts. And so positive would be if you serviced your loans on time and you successfully completed the payment according to your obligations. Databases containing information relevant to making credit decisions, such as credit histories, personal data, and other information on borrowers represents a great concentration of power. So the impact of misleading information, misuse or mishandling of information, or erroneous information is potentially damaging to individuals. Consumers will have the right to dispute information held by the Credit Bureau that they perceive to be inaccurate, incomplete, or out of date in a timely and low-cost manner. The Data Protection Commissioner, appointed pursuant to the Data Protection Act, has responsibility for enforcing the provisions of that act with respect to protecting the personal data of individuals, and it is proposed that the Data Protection Commissioner's power and responsibilities be extended to protecting consumer rights with respect to disputed credit reporting information. Mr. Speaker, I now turn to the provisions of the bill itself. The objective of the credit reporting bill is to facilitate the effective supervision of credit reporting sector and the efficient operation of a credit bureau. The bill is divided into 9 parts as set out below. Part 1 of the bill provides for the short title and commencement of the bill and sets out definitions of various terms used in the bill. Part 2 of the bill sets out the provisions authorizing the central bank to supervise and regulate the credit reporting sector and set out the powers and duties of the bank. Part 3 of the bill sets out the requirements for a credit bureau to be licensed and the basis on which a license may be suspended, revoked, or surrendered. The bill also provides for the payment of fees by the credit bureau and requires a licensed credit bureau to undergo annual audits and compliance reviews by an independent auditor. Part 4 of the bill prescribes the purposes for which a consumer credit report may be used, the persons who may access those reports, and establishes standards for the collection, storage, and dissemination of those reports. The bill sets out the activities which credit bureaus are authorized to conduct. These include collecting, evaluating, and disseminating consumer information to users of the credit bureau. The bill lists the entities that are required to furnish data, subject information to the credit bureau. These credit information providers will include banks, insurance companies, non-bank money lenders, credit unions, the Bahamas Mortgage Corporation, and the Bahamas Development Bank. The bill authorizes the central bank to designate other entities as credit information providers, where such designation is in the public interest. These additional entities may include a public registry, Bahamas Power and Light Company, a licensee of the Utilities Regulation and Competition Authority, the Water and Sewage Corporation, or any person carrying out the business of selling goods pursuant to a hire purchase agreement. The Credit Bureau will also obtain public record information such as court judgments directly from the courts. The bill prohibits the inclusion of certain types of information in a credit report which might expose a borrower to discrimination. This prohibition covers information regarding the race, creed, color, medical information, ancestry, ethnic origin, or political affiliation of a borrower, or judgments which have been satisfied. The bill lists the permissible purposes for which a credit bureau may provide a credit report to a user. Permissible purposes are for the consideration of an application for credit or an offer to act as a guarantor of an applicant for credit. B, for use in connection with the purchase or collection of a debt of the consumer, to entering into or renewal of a tenancy agreement with the consumer, the underwriting of insurance involving the consumer. C, for use in connection with a business or credit transaction involving a data subject that is not mentioned in paragraph A or B above. Or D, for use relating to pre-employment checks in respect of a consumer for a position involving a significant financial risk. E, periodic portfolio monitoring and risk assessment purposes, collection and skip tracing. And F, for any permissible purpose as the central bank may from time to time specify by regulation. A credit bureau is mandated to provide a credit report in response to a court order. Clause 24 of the bill makes it an offense for a credit bureau to issue consumer information other than for a permissible purpose or in response to a court order. And I outlined the permissible purposes already. Clause 21(1) of the bill sets out the obligations of credit information providers, which include the submission of accurate data subject information to the credit bureau, updating that information, and ensuring that data subject information is subjected to rigorous standards of security and reliability. Clause 22 of the bill requires the credit bureau to take appropriate measures to keep data subject information updated and to implement quality controls to ensure that data subject information is accurate, legitimate, reliable, and comprehensive. Clause 22(2)(b)(2) also requires a credit bureau to ensure that data subject information is not kept longer than necessary for any permissible purpose. However, personal information may be retained for statistical or research purposes. Clause 23 of the bill requires the credit bureau to secure data subject information against unauthorized access to or alteration, disclosure, or destruction of the data, and against accidental loss or destruction of the data. Clause 23(2)(c) requires the credit bureau to enter a subscriber agreement before disclosing consumer information to a subscriber. And subscribers are those who will use the report. And so before the credit bureau can disclose information, they must have a subscriber agreement in place, which will bind them to the same level of security and confidentiality as the credit bureau. Subscribers will include, for example, banks, credit unions, insurers, non-bank money lenders, the Bahamas Development Bank, Bahamas Mortgage Corporation, etc. As a credit bureau collects and handles personal information of individuals, the legal and regulatory framework for credit reporting must address the issue of data privacy and consumer protection, and must afford data subjects rights in this regard. Under Clause 24 of the bill, consumers will have the right to A, know that their information is being shared with the credit bureau, and know who has requested a copy of their credit report. B, have information held by the credit bureau that they perceive to be inaccurate, misleading, incomplete, or out of date, corrected in a timely manner. C, receive a free credit report annually upon request from the credit bureau. In any case, D, in any case where a correction is made to a data subject's credit report, they are also entitled to receive another free copy of the corrected credit report. Where a data subject requests a credit report from a credit bureau, the credit bureau must furnish the data subject with a credit report within 5 working days of the data subject's requests. Data subject meaning the consumer. So within 5 days of making a request for a credit report, your own credit report, the credit bureau must within 5 days produce that report to you. Clause 25 of the bill prohibits the credit bureau from disseminating data subject information to third parties without the data subject's consent. A credit bureau must verify the identity of a third party requesting a copy of the data subject's credit report. Clause 26 of the bill provides that a data subject is entitled to a free credit report in any case where the data subject has been denied credit. Clause 27 of the bill prohibits a credit bureau from disclosing data subject information for longer than 5 years after the date of termination or settlement of such credit. Clause 30 of the bill provides that a data subject may dispute the accuracy of information produced in their credit report. Clause 31 of the bill provides that the credit bureau may, with the prior approval of the central bank, outsource the processing of data subject information to a person or entity based outside the Bahamas. And again, that is in reference to the hub and spoke model that has been suggested, meaning that the processing may happen in another jurisdiction where that data may be housed, but it is protected by the same provisions that are in this bill. Part 5 of the bill authorizes the central bank to conduct inspections of and call for information from credit bureaus. Clause 32 of the bill provides that the central bank is authorized to require a credit bureau to provide any information or documentation which the bank considers necessary to enable it to properly discharge its functions as the supervisory authority for the credit reporting sector. The central bank may itself or by its appointed agents conduct on-site inspections of credit bureaus and may also require access to books and records of the credit bureau. The central bank may not, however, access the credit information of a data subject without the consent of the data subject or a court order. The cost of inspections is to be borne by the credit bureau. Part 6 of the bill addresses the civil liability of a credit bureau for damages sustained by a data subject as a result of the credit bureau's gross negligence in failing to comply with the Credit Reporting Act or regulations. Part 7 of the bill establishes the Credit Reporting Review Commission. The role of the commission is to provide for an objective and independent review of any action or decision taken by the credit bureau as it relates to its clients or underlying data subjects, or by the central bank as it relates to any of the credit reporting system participants. Part 7 prescribes that the procedure for the commission to review A, the actions, decisions, or conduct of the credit bureau where the credit bureau does not issue a decision within the prescribed time for resolving a dispute, or if the consumer is not satisfied with the decisions of the credit bureau in relation to a dispute, or B, the action or decision of the central bank in respect of a credit bureau. Clause 41 requires the Commission to issue a written decision on any application submitted to it for review within 28 days of receipt of the application. The Commission must notify the applicant of the right to appeal the decisions under Part 8 of the bill no later than 7 days following the date of the decision, and must notify any person who participated in the proceedings before the Review Commission of the reasons for the Commission's decision. The Review Commission has power to make its decisions available for public inspection, provided such disclosure is lawful, in the public interest, and not likely to prejudice the legitimate commercial interests of the credit bureau, which was a party to the proceedings, or the interest of the aggrieved consumer. Part 8 of the bill establishes a right of appeal from the decisions of the Credit Reporting Review Committee to the Supreme Court, and from the Supreme Court to the Court of Appeal. Clause 42 of the bill provides that a decision of the Commission may be appealed to the Supreme Court within 28 days of the decision or order. On hearing an appeal, the Supreme Court may A, dismiss the appeal, B, allow the appeal, C, allow the appeal subject to terms and conditions, D, verify the decisions or order of the central bank or commission, E, refer the matter back to the central bank or commission for further consideration and a decision, or make such order as the court deems appropriate. Clause 43 of the bill provides that an appeal for a decision of the Supreme Court to the Court of Appeal may be made on a question of law only. An appeal must be launched within 6 weeks of the date of the decision or order of the Supreme Court. Part 9 of the bill addresses miscellaneous provisions, including confidentiality requirements and offenses. Clause 44 of the bill authorizes the central bank to enter arrangements with counterpart overseas regulatory authorities for the purpose of administering or enforcing the Credit Reporting Act, or for other purposes respecting credit reporting services that the central bank believes is in the public's interest. Clause 45 of the bill provides that information obtained by the central bank as a result of an inspection or audit must be treated as confidential. Such information may be accessed by directors, officers, or employees of the central bank, or persons authorized by the central bank, only if and to the extent that such access is required to enable them to carry out their responsibilities. Central bank officials and persons authorized by the bank are prohibited from disclosing confidential information unless authorized under the Credit Reporting Act or other law, or with the consent of the person to whom the information relates. So you can see we're building in security. Clause 53 of the bill authorizes the transfer of a credit bureau's database to the central bank where the credit bureau is being wound up or liquidated, or where it has surrendered its license. The central bank is authorized to determine whether the credit bureau's activities will be continued, and for a period not exceeding 12 months, retains the right to use the credit bureau's platform until the evaluation and selection process to grant a new credit bureau license is completed. Clause 53(1) of the bill provides that a credit bureau must first obtain the approval of the central bank before passing a resolution to suspend its activities or wind up its operations. Now, turning to the regulations, Mr. Speaker, the credit reporting regulations sets out the information and documents which must accompany an application for a license to operate a credit bureau in the Bahamas. The regulations describe the factors which the central bank must take into account when evaluating an application for a credit bureau license, including, for example, the experience and qualifications of persons who will operate the credit bureau, whether such persons are fit and proper, the business plan of the credit bureau operators, and the adequacy of its safety and security measures. Regulation 12 requires credit bureaus to furnish the central bank with periodic returns regarding their business operations in such form and within such time as the bank may require. Regulation 8 prescribes the type of information which may be collected and disseminated by a credit bureau, which includes personal information, the credit history of the data subject, including the nature and amount of loans granted or to be granted, any security taken or proposed to be taken by a credit provider for the aforementioned loans, and the pattern of loan repayments and debt restructuring. Regulation 8.3a provides that personal information about a natural person, including names, date of birth, national insurance or national identity numbers, passport numbers, driver's license numbers, and past and current addresses. Regulation 8.3b provides that information about a company or other legal person, including their business name, registration, names of the company, names of directors, shareholders or partners, the current registered address, and past registered address. Regulation 8.5 provides that before a credit bureau discloses information about a data subject to a third party, for the purposes of evaluating a data subject's application for credit, the third party must first certify to the credit bureau that they will use the data subject information only for a permitted purpose. that they will properly disclose of data subject information so that it cannot reasonably be read or reconstructed, and that they have adequate security and control systems to protect any data subject related data which they receive. The central bank may specify, by notice published in the Gazette, additional credit related information which credit providers must transmit to the Credit Bureau. Regulation 9 provides that where a data subject requests a credit report from a credit bureau, the credit report should clearly and accurately disclose the following to the data subject. A, the nature and substance of all information in the credit bureau's file regarding the data subject at the time of the request. B, the source of such information. C, the name of all persons to whom a credit report regarding the data subject has been provided within the previous 12 months. And D, the contents of any written credit report regarding the data subject made to any other person. The Credit Bureau must also inform the data subject of his or her right to dispute any information in the Credit Bureau's file and of the procedure for filing a dispute. Regulation 11 provides that when a data subject is denied credit by a credit provider, the credit provider is required to advise the data subject of the contact details and address of the Credit Bureau which furnished the data subject's credit report and of the data subject's right to dispute the report with the Credit Bureau or to have any errors or outdated information corrected. Regulation 14 provides that a data subject may dispute the completeness or accuracy of a credit report by submitting a written notice of dispute, which contains details regarding the disputed information and an indication of the action which the data subject expects the Credit Bureau to take. The Credit Bureau is required to address disputes expeditiously and inform data subjects of any action they propose to take regarding their investigations into a complaint. Regulation 15.2 provides that where, following its investigation, the Credit Bureau is of the view that information on the data subject's file is accurate, complete, and verified, it is required to inform the data subject and to also advise the data subject of their right to file a written statement of dispute containing not more than 200 words, setting out the nature of their dispute regarding the information. Regulation 15.3 provides that the Credit Bureau must, unless the data subject directs otherwise, provide a copy of the statement of the dispute to any person who received a copy of the data subject's credit report within the preceding 6 months, and attach a copy of the statement of dispute to any subsequent issued credit reports. And so it's again giving further protection to the consumer that if they get a bad credit report which they think is inaccurate, that the Credit Bureau must, when they give a credit report to a user, disclose any disputed credit reports that had been filed within the last 6 months, which may be evaluated by the user as to whether they want to discount or somehow further assess the credit rating. Regulation 15.2b provides that if the Credit Bureau finds that information on file regarding a data subject is erroneous, obsolete, or incomplete, it must, within 7 days, update the information by completing or correcting the information or deleting the information as the case may be. The Credit Bureau must also give written notice of the actions taken to the data subject, and unless the data subject directs otherwise, any person who received the credit report on the data subject during the previous 6 months. And so if the Credit Bureau finds that it issued inaccurate information, it must within 6 months issue a notice to persons they may, or companies they may have given this inaccurate report to. Regulation 16.1 provides that where a credit information provider becomes aware that information provided to the Credit Bureau was inaccurate at the time it was provided, that the credit information provider must, within 5 working days thereafter, instruct the credit bureau, by way of an amended notice, to delete the inaccurate information and replace it with correct information. And so if a lender gives the credit bureau inaccurate information and it comes to their knowledge, they are required within 5 working days to advise the credit bureau that the information was in fact inaccurate. Regulation 16.2 provides that where a credit information provider receives a notice of dispute from a credit bureau, the credit information provider shall, within 10 working days of receipt of the notice of dispute, complete its investigation into the disputed information and give the credit bureau a notice of resolution advising whether the disputed information is to be deleted, amended, or it is to remain unchanged. Regulation 17.1 requires the credit bureau that receives a notice pursuant to Regulation 16.1 or 16.2 to notify a subscriber that obtained a credit report containing the disputed information from the credit bureau within the preceding 12 months of whether or not any change was made to the data subject information which was in dispute. Regulation 18.1 provides that a credit bureau is required to apply high standards for screening its staff and may not hire any person who is an undischarged bankrupt or enters into a composition or scheme of arrangement with his or her creditor. B, has been convicted of an offense involving fraud or dishonesty. Or C, has been removed from office under the provisions of the Credit Reporting Act and these regulations. Regulation 18.2 provides that where a person referred to in Regulation 18.1 is already in the employ of the credit bureau, the person shall be disqualified, and upon such disqualification shall not be eligible to hold office in or be in the employ of any credit bureau for a period of 10 years from the date of the disqualification. Regulation 19 provides that a credit bureau, it is heavy because this is sensitive information that you're dealing with. And so to the extent that you are disqualified, we want to make sure that there is severe penalty so that we protect the integrity of the reporting system. Absolutely. Regulation 19 provides that a credit bureau may impose charges for its services, including the provision of credit reports, as may be agreed between the user and the credit bureau. The credit bureau may not impose any charge when it conducts an investigation into a dispute of a data subject, provides a free annual credit report, or corrects disputed information. Mr. Speaker, this is an important piece of legislation aimed at strengthening the stability of the financial sector and supporting credit growth. It will place the Bahamas financial infrastructure in a much better position and hopefully encourage a restart of bank lending that is so important for our economic growth objectives. Mr. Speaker, this is a piece of legislation that financial institutions have been requesting, certainly since I came to office, because they see it as a valuable tool for them to be able to manage their risk profiles in a much more effective, objective, empirical way. And at the end of the day, the overall benefit to the Bahamian consumer is that the banks, because of more prudent tools and objective tools available to them, will be able to issue more quality loans, which will in turn result in less non-performing loans, which then gives the bank the opportunity to reduce some of those ridiculous fees that we know about. And it also allows the banks to use your rating, your credit reporting, credit rating, as a objective measure to determine what your interest rate may be. Because obviously, as in all things, the higher the risk, the more the return you expect. And so if you have a poor credit history, your interest rates are probably going to be higher. If you have a very good history, your rate's going to be lower. And so there is a benefit to the bank in that they can manage their risk a little better, but there's also a benefit for the consumer who maintains a good credit rating because his rate can come down and not be lumped in with this sort of average rate that tries to take a middle road between bad payers and good payers. So there is a benefit to the average consumer in respect to this. It is true that there will probably be in the initial ramping up of this bill, or this credit bureau, that there may be some reductions in the level of credit. That's to be expected. But the truth of the matter is we're already in that process. Because today, you will know that all of these banks are awash with liquidity. And that's because they have been pulling back on lending. So we don't anticipate that there will be much of an effect, but there's the potential for some further contracting of credit in the short term while the credit bureau spool up and achieves the data input that it needs in order to make quality credit decisions going forward. Once enacted, it will take some 18 to 24 months before a credit bureau can become operational, given the huge data collection efforts involved. And you can imagine that they have to get information from the furniture company, the car company, the bank, everybody. So there's a lot of data that's got to go into this credit bureau in order to be able to give a true and accurate credit assessment. During this time, however, it is expected that consumers will have an opportunity to make further adjustments to their borrowing profile that would enable them to successfully access the credit market at competitive rates. And it will give the central bank, the lending institutions, and the selected service provider, it is anticipated, that the central bank, the lending institution, and the selected service providers will commence an appropriate consumer education and information campaign about the operations of the proposed credit bureau, their rights and obligations. Mr. Speaker, I believe this bill is moving us in the right direction, and it is overall credit positive to our sovereign ratings and domestic and international credit profile. Mr. Speaker, I so move this credit reporting bill 2016 and the accompanying credit reporting regulations 2016.
Is there a seconder? The chair recognizes the honorable member for Elizabeth.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it is indeed an honor and a privilege to stand here to speak on behalf of the good people of the great constituency of Elizabeth. And I want to come at this bill, the credit reporting bill, from a somewhat different angle, because I imagine that there are some people listening and watching us today that want to know what is in this for them. Mr. Speaker, I have gone on record as suggesting that the country has been built in phases. The basic work, the rough work, has been done by, there used to be across the floor, but most of the finished work, Mr. Speaker, has been done by the Free National Movement. If we look historically, there has been significant economic planning in the history of the world. The first economist was probably a fellow called Joseph from Canaan. Joseph of Canaan was one of the youngest sons who had a number of brothers. We remember him as having a coat of many colors. He was a dreamer. And he had a dream one day that his brothers would bow down to him. And he would always be telling these dreams. And one day his brothers got upset at him and they threw him in a ditch. They took his coat of many colors. They took the blood of an animal, put it on the coat, and sold him into slavery. It turned out that that young man, Joseph, became the second most important economic advisor in Egypt. As a matter of fact, he is most well remembered for interpreting a dream that caused the Egyptians to understand that during the 7 years of plenty that they should store up. And they stored up and they managed to survive 7 years of famine. Joseph became the advisor to Pharaoh. And as I speak this afternoon, I am going to tell you this story, and I want you to see the striking similarities to the situation that we have here today. You know, Mr. Speaker, there are some unfortunate statements that are made politically. One of the most unfortunate statements ever made was by a politician named John McCain, November 17, 2008, when he said that the fundamentals of the economy are strong. Now, if you remember, the economic meltdown in the United States took place in 2008. That's right. Move forward to March 2017, when the Right Honorable Perry Gladstone Christie said, "To the contrary, we have over the past 5 years steadfastly maintained a policy focused on the fundamental and durable long-term economic and social objectives." March 31st, 2017. John McCain lost the presidential election, and Perry Gladstone Christie lost not only his seat, but his party lost the general election. Mr. Speaker, I am the grandchild of humble beginnings. My grandmother ran a tuck shop on Freetown Lane off Camp Road.
It was a Camp Road boy.
A lot of people think I was born with a silver spoon in my mouth, but anyway. But when my grandmother was in the house, she would send me to tend the shop. And you know the story. People would come to the shop, say, "Come to the shop." And they would say, "Mommy sent me. Can I trust some sugar? Can I trust some this? Can I trust some that?"
He's a real Camp Road boy.
And what I would do is I would go to my grandmother and I would say, "So-and-so is here. Can they trust some sugar?" And depending on who it was, she would either say yes, or she would send me with another message. The message was, "In God we trust, all others pay cash." So way back, 45 years ago, my grandmother had established in the Bahamas a way of defining who had good credit and who didn't have good credit. Now, Mr. Speaker, when we look at the state of affairs in the Bahamas, you will realize that things are bad. The economics, the fundamentals of our economy are not strong. And specifically, they get better during certain periods, and they get worse during certain periods. I put it to you, Mr. Speaker, that the statement made on March 31st, 2017 was made at the end of one of the worst periods of economic guidance in the history of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Now, I can tie all this together, Mr. Speaker, because you see, in 2009, I was appointed as a director of the Central Bank of the Bahamas. And having been appointed as a director of the Central Bank of the Bahamas, one of the initiatives that we started in 2009 was the creation of a credit bureau. As a matter of fact, in 2010, the then governor of the central bank, Ms. Wendy Craig, foreshadowed the introduction of a credit bureau in 18 to 24 months. Unfortunately, another administration came into being, and they shelved the plans for the introduction of a credit bureau. You may recall, Mr. Speaker, that we were having serious challenges with credit and that the world economy had been turned upside down. To get an idea of how bad it was, Mr. Speaker, in 2012, 16.1% of all Bahamian loans were non-performing. To give you an idea of the context, that is 3 times worse than the level of non-performing loans in Greece when they went bankrupt. 3 times worse than Greece when they were bailed out by the IMF and the European Union. The arrears in the Bahamas for mortgages had grown from 8.8% in 2005 to 22% at its highest rate in 2012. Mr. Speaker, 90% of Bahamians do not have $5,000 in their bank account. Of the civil service salary that is paid on a monthly basis, between 70 and 80% of civil service salaries do not go home with the civil servant. They go to banks, they go to furniture companies, they go to insurance companies for credit. Mr. Speaker, when we add to that unfunded pension liabilities, which was as high as $2.2 billion in 2016 and anticipated to grow to $3.7 billion by 2030, we realize that things are not good. And so when the last administration saw these challenges, what did they do? They did not seek to address the fundamentals, Mr. Speaker. What they sought to do was to promise the people something that they could not deliver. They called it mortgage relief. And what they suggested was that despite the fact that people were drowning in debt, that what they would do was take public funds and bail out these persons without addressing the fundamental issues. We know what happened with that failed and flawed plan, Mr. Speaker. It did not work. It did not help. And so when we look at what has happened, there has been no substantive or significant improvement. If you don't believe me, go and look at the central bank report published on November 20th, 2017. I'm sorry, it is dated November 20th, 2017, but it was published on December 27th, 2017. And that report, alluded to by the Deputy Prime Minister, speaks to the impact of these persons who act like Joseph, who have suggested that prudent fiscal management is the way to get out of trouble. I would highly recommend to everybody listening to go and look at that central bank report because it tells some interesting things. For instance, did you know that in October of 2017, that total arrivals to the Bahamas in October was up 30% as compared to the year before? 30%, Mr. Speaker. In 2016, it was down 10.8%. Liquidity in the Bahamas was up to $1.84 billion. Our reserves were healthy at $1.435 billion. To compare it to when the other people were running the country, reserves were $937 million. $937 million in October of 2016, $1.435 billion in 2017. 900,000 after 7 months or 6 months by this administration, up to 1.4 billion. Now, the situation with loans. The Deputy Prime Minister and member for East Grand Bahama would have said that we have a serious problem, Mr. Speaker. The arrears in our loan portfolio is now almost $1 billion. Well, it's down to just under $1 billion, which is about 15.6% of all the loans in the market. Non-performing loans, the worst, these are the dead loans, or the ones that people are really underwater, account for $575 million. The total credit in the Bahamas is just under $6 billion. $2.2 billion is consumer credit, $2.8 billion are mortgages, and commercial credit is $666. So, what have we to do? As Joseph did in the Bible days, you got to take some strong medicine. And the strong medicine that's recommended, Mr. Speaker, addresses a lot of the challenges that people complain about every day. They go to Bank A, they go to Bank B, they go to Bank C, and they say, I can't get any money. The introduction of this credit bureau allows the banks to determine who ought to be getting loans. Because there are some people who are so overextended that there is no way that they can pay a loan unless somebody throw them a blow or unless they box a number properly. I'm not suggesting that that is an effective strategy. So what this credit bureau will do, and what we have decided it is reasonable to do, Mr. Speaker, is to see to it that those people who are disciplined, those people who are serious about repaying debt, get access to credit at a very low interest rate. Those people who do not demonstrate discipline should either have minimal access to credit or pay a significantly higher risk-related interest rate, so that if you default, at least the bank can cover its losses. Joseph advised Pharaoh to store away some corn. We are advising the people of the Bahamas that it should not be business as usual.
Absolutely.
We cannot allow a person to go from business to business to business and defaulting on loans. Let me go get a car. Let me go get a house. Let me go buy a washing machine. I know that I don't pay my bills, but I will dress up in a nice three-piece suit, and I will make myself sound good, and I will get some credit, and then I will walk away from it. For people that rent houses, you've heard the story. Somebody comes in with first month, last month, and security deposit, and that's the last time you will ever get any money from them. Well, a credit bureau will tell you who those people are, so that if you want to be nice to somebody, be nice to somebody that has a decent credit rating. And those people that don't have a decent credit rating, you leave them alone. Tell them you're not interested in that business. Mr. Speaker, we have recognized that we have to rebuild the fundamentals of this economy. It is going to require that we do some things that may make some people unhappy, and particularly those people that have gotten by taking advantage of the unsuspecting. Doctors, lawyers, furniture dealers, automobile dealers, every legitimate business in this country is carrying very high receivables because of people that do not wish to pay their bills or will not pay their bills. And so, Mr. Speaker, we believe that the credit reporting bill that we are presenting today will help us to solve the problem, to prevent the Bahamas from going into the downfall that we experienced in 2008. Like Joseph in the Bible days, we are recommending that we salt away during plenty so that we can have in times of famine. I thank you, Mr. Speaker. I support this bill.
Thank you, Honorable Member. It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read a second time and committed. A bill for an act to provide for the fair and accurate credit reporting system within the financial system in order to assure objective credit decision, to enable credit information sharing and reporting, to provide for the regulation of the conduct of credit reporting and credit reporting services, to provide safeguards for data protection for customers of the credit providers, and for connected matters. As many, the Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for St. Anne's.
Mr. Speaker, as it is 1 o'clock, I rise to move a motion that the House do continue beyond the 1 o'clock hour to allow the finishing of the bill before us.
It is second. It has been moved and seconded that the business of this House suspend and continue beyond 1 o'clock. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those who oppose will rise. The business will continue beyond 1 p.m. As many? The Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for Tall Pines.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wish to stand, Mr. Speaker, to support this credit reporting bill. Speaker, I stand here humbly on behalf of the people of Tall Pines and wish, Mr. Speaker, to say on behalf of the people of Tall Pines, firstly, that we sympathize with our colleagues and friends and fellow citizens in Abaco in regards to what has transpired there a few days ago in terms of the fire in the mud. We also wish to say, Mr. Speaker, that we feel their pain. But Mr. Speaker, before I move into that and further support our feelings with regards to what transpired and where we are now. Thank you. Speaker, Tall Pines stands to support the bill before the House this morning. Speaker, the Bahamas, like so many countries in the Caribbean, we are dependent on the financial institution as a strong sector in our economy. Speaker, the Bahamas, like so many Caribbean countries, we rely on salaries. As they say in the Bahamas, we live one paycheck to the next. Speaker, but there comes a time in a country's development when we have to look at our financial services and the way we do business in terms of credit very seriously. And I'm so happy, Mr. Speaker, to see the Bahamas finally moving in the 21st century as it relates to the credit market. Speaker, as the Deputy Prime Minister and member for East Grand Bahama has indicated, this process started several years ago. But, Mr. Speaker, I want us Bahamians to understand that, unfortunately, we are a little bit behind in this regard. In Jamaica, my research found that they have similar regime since 2010, and Trinidad and Tobago since 2004. But nonetheless, this government has decided, and rightfully so, to table this bill. And I suspect, Mr. Speaker, that we will have the benefit of this bill being passed, and in the long term, a better financial industry, a better credit market regime. Speaker, the central bank governor, I think last year, said that the credit bureaus will be an eye-opener for Bahamians. And I share that sentiment. My colleague from Elizabeth, he went down home, if we could use that term. And so, Mr. Speaker, I just want to follow that trend, because realistically, I think Bahamians have to understand the significance of what we're getting ourselves into. Speaker, yes, this bill creates an atmosphere where there is a market in the Bahamas. Well, let me say that, yes, it creates a situation in the Bahamas now, Mr. Speaker, where Bahamians now will be scrutinized by borrowers, by lenders, Mr. Speaker. Speaker, financial institutions now will have access to information via the Bureau. Speaker, one might question whether this is a good thing. I know many Bahamians, we watch TV every day and we see the commercials on CNN, we see on NBC, and we see Americans picking up their phones and checking their credit ratings. That is now the way we will be doing business in the Bahamas. Now, can this help the borrower? As my colleague from Elizabeth said, and the member for East Grand Bahama has indicated, this will help the borrower, Mr. Speaker. Because what this now does is forces us to be more prudent in our financial affairs. We now know that there would be a regime that would cause us to be more responsible. Because we cannot, as the member from Elizabeth said, go from bank to bank, furniture company to furniture company, car lender to car lender, and not worry about the circumstances or the consequences of what we did yesterday with respect to our finances. Yes, this would be good to the lender, Mr. Speaker, because now the lender would have an opportunity to know who they are lending to, the history behind it. Speaker, the Bahamas, unfortunately, over the years, we have a very, very high default rate, Speaker. It is now a very risky business now to be lending money. About $1 billion in bad loans, if we could use that term, Mr. Speaker. But I think at this point, Mr. Speaker, it is interesting that now, Mr. Speaker, the central bank is in a position to authorize or to designate even our utility businesses, Cable Bahamas, BPL, Water and Sewage, to now give records, and that's going to have an impact on Bahamians. Speaker, I say to every Bahamian out there, to pull up your sleeves, pull up your pants, and now be more responsible. Mr. Speaker, this is indeed a necessity for the Bahamas as we move forward. And I'm happy, Mr. Speaker, that this bill makes it an offense, Mr. Speaker, for persons who work in these institutions, persons who have access to our data, our personal data. It provides for an offense for those who misuse, who are negligent, who are misleading, to give information to these credit bureaus, and even for the credit bureaus to be held negligent if they misuse this information. And that's a good thing. That's a protection for every Bahamian out there. Mr. Speaker, I want to speak, Mr. Speaker, to the young lady who said yesterday in our town hall meeting in Tall Pines, Mr. Speaker, the Bahamas will be aware of the fact that we are suffering a fire at the city landfill. And, Mr. Speaker, myself as the Member of Parliament, I was there on the dump site for 2 days. And I walk and I drive through my communities in Tall Pines that are still being affected by the smoke. And so, Mr. Speaker, we found it important to call an emergency town hall meeting to speak with our members in that constituency. And we had the senior deputy director of the environment, Ms. Wilson, and Mr. Ryan, who was an analyst for the department there, to speak about the air quality. Speaker, one of the things one of the ladies said there at that meeting last night was that because her house is in the fire smoke zone, she ain't paying her mortgage no more. She ain't paying for no house in Jubilee Gardens that she can't breathe in and she can't live in. Now you might say, what's the significance of that to this bill? There is a connection, Mr. Speaker, because I'm saying that that young lady who lives in Jubilee Gardens, while she's affected by the smoke, while she's affected by the environmental issues in her community, that if you don't sit back and think about the fact that now that a bill such as this can affect your livelihood in the future. Because when you don't pay the mortgage corporation, Mr. Speaker, that information is now, Speaker, being recorded. That information is now going to be used against her when that house is repossessed. And I say the same thing to the young man who said that it makes no sense for me, Mr. Speaker. It makes no sense for me to go out there and pay my bills because I have to use these funds now to pay hospital bills because I see the government not checking for me. That's what they're saying. That's what they said, Mr. Speaker. But I say to him also, Mr. Speaker, this bill, while it is a good bill for our country and I support it, our Bahamians must come to the realization that their actions, there will be consequences for their actions. And so I speak, Mr. Speaker, for the young man and the young woman in Jubilee, and I think throughout the Commonwealth of the Bahamas when we say, there has to be, Mr. Speaker, there has to be an education process as it relates to our financing and how we deal with our financing and how we approach such activities and such actions. Now, Mr. Speaker, while I talked about the fire issue, Speaker, I just want to say to my colleague, as I feel for that lady who wants to maybe negatively affect her credit rating, can you work with us, Government of the Bahamas? I hear the Minister of the Environment speak very elegantly about what's going to transpire in the coming months. And I support the government. I shared with my people in Tall Pines, Mr. Speaker, that the Prime Minister lived up to his commitment when he said that he was going to make the landfill issue a priority. I advise the people in Tall Pines that the Prime Minister lived up to his word when he told his Minister of the Environment to make it a priority. And now we are so much closer, Mr. Speaker, to having a successful manager of the dump or the landfill. Speaker, the Minister noted that on the 31st of March that the proposals will be reviewed and by May a company would be selected. But I asked the Minister and I asked this government of the Bahamas, what do we do in the meantime? Speaker, the concern for those people whose asset is their greatest asset, Mr. Speaker? Their homes. Their greatest asset, their homes. Their communities, because the community around them. Where do you live in Jubilee? Victoria is your community, as your neighboring community, Speaker. And that's an asset to you. What happens in the meantime, Mr. Speaker, while we wait for May 2018? Are we truly putting the resources that are needed immediately to the landfill? Speaker, and I asked the minister responsible for the police force and the fire department, is the fire department working with the members of the employment of the landfill? Because I observed, Mr. Speaker, and I'm not questioning the professionalism of the fire department, but I watched 90% of the firefighting that was done on the dump, Mr. Speaker, was done by the employees of the dump. And I understand the role of the fire department, but is the fire department working with those employees in training for these activities? Because the sentiment around was that more could have been done, and if more had been done, we would not have gone to that point. Is the fire department, Mr. Speaker, working with those employees to make sure that when there's a small fire, that it doesn't spread as quickly? Are they patrolling the area with the dump employees to make sure that those fire trucks, Mr. Speaker, have access? Speaker, these are the assets of the people of Tall Pines. These are the assets that they would be judged upon with this credit rating regime now. Speaker, I just humbly ask my government that in the interim, we have to remember, Mr. Speaker, there's 3 months before May 2018. After that winner is selected, how many more months after that before they actually take foot at the landfill to protect the assets of the people of Tall Pines and the neighboring surrounding areas? Would it be 3, 4, 5 months? A fire could erupt tomorrow, Mr. Speaker. We simply are saying that we hear the commitment and we look forward to the minister providing those equipment that he says that he would provide or that they're asking for in terms of fighting fires, Mr. Speaker. We don't want the government, Mr. Speaker, to be frank. We don't want the government to say, to be frank, we don't want the government to say we only have a few more months before a management team is selected. So we don't have to put the fire truck there. We don't have to put the pump there to protect the assets of those people. We want them to, Mr. Speaker, take action now. And if we buy those things and make them available, there's always the family islands we could give them to, Mr. Speaker. There's always an opportunity for us to stock them and use them for other means. But the message I want to bring here, Mr. Speaker, is the message is from my people in Tall Pines, that their asset, that they're going to be judged on this credit reporting bill, to be their homes and their communities. And until that manager is selected, Mr. Speaker, and until the government hands over, and until that company takes foot, the government still has an obligation to protect that asset of those people in Tall Pines and the neighboring constituencies. And so, Mr. Speaker, I challenge my government. And the minister, when he comes, he says that he's going to come and visit us to give us the full story on the RSP and the next few weeks. I challenge him, Mr. Speaker, to speak directly to them. I challenge him, Mr. Speaker, because they asked me to ask the Prime Minister to come. Speaker, I'm just being bold. I told them I'd say it. They said to ask the Prime Minister to come. They said the Prime Minister's going to Abago. The Prime Minister's going to Andres. We are indeed right now where they want to see Kalani. They want to see Marathon. They want to see Mount Moriah. They want to see Elizabeth. They want to see the ministers who are directly responsible. Obviously, Mr. Speaker, they would want to see Yamacraw. They would want to see Yamacraw, Mr. Speaker, because now, after the last fire, people were getting, Mr. Speaker, detergent, Mr. Speaker. People were getting washing credit, Mr. Speaker. So yes, thank you, Seabreeze. But the reality, the point, Mr. Speaker, is this. The point is this, Mr. Speaker. They want to see our leaders, and they want the response. And they are not prepared, and I'm not prepared for us to not take action now. Because tomorrow, Mr. Speaker, a fire could start tomorrow. We could end this fire next week, and another fire could start. And where we are again, fire engine sitting there and maybe not already being in a position that had plans with the dump or the landfill employees to how to tackle the fire. Mr. Speaker, our assets as Bahamians are, our greatest assets is our home. When we go to the bank, the first thing the bank is going to look for, and these same persons who the credit bureau will be getting information from are the banks. And the people that don't feel comfortable enough in their communities to pay for their mortgages, their number one assets, then it's going to be a problem for many, many Bahamians. Speaker, I do support the bill, and I appreciate you allowing me to speak and to make that little curve, or that sharp turn, then, Mr. Speaker, and how important it is for this government to respect and to really hold a sense of responsibility for the assets of the people of Tall Pines and the assets of the people of the Bahamas in their homes. Speaker, Tall Pines support the bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
As many?
Mr. Speaker, I think both speakers this afternoon have spoken eloquently on the subject. This, again, is a bill that will provide some stability and some objectivity to the granting of credit, which will, at the end of the day, result in a quality credit market that will inure to the benefit of both the commercial and the private sector as we facilitate the ease of accessing credit in this current environment. Again, Mr. Speaker, we all know about the issue with banks and the downsizing that is attended there too, a lot of which has to do with the fact that the cost of non-performing loans has risen to such an extent that they are looking for ways in which to cut costs. And the contraction consolidations we see, unfortunately, has a lot to do with the quality of the loan book that exists in these institutions. And so, Mr. Speaker, I commend this bill to members for their support. I think it's going to put us on the stage with the developed world in terms of responsibility and the access and the objective marking of credit scores in this country. And all of that will inure to the benefit of a strong economy that is growing and that is providing opportunities for those who are deserving of accessing these markets. So I commend members for their support, proposed support, and I move the bill for third reading.
Thank you, Honourable Member. It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read a second time and committed. A bill for an act to provide for the fair and accurate credit reporting system within the financial system in order to assure the objective credit decisions, to enable credit information sharing and reporting, to provide for the regulation of the conduct of credit reporting and credit reporting services, to provide safeguards for data protection for customers of credit providers and for connected matters. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those who oppose will stand. Order that the bill be read a second time and committed.
A bill for an act to provide for a fair and accurate credit reporting system within the financial system in order to assure objective credit decisions, to enable credit information sharing and reporting, to provide for the regulation of the conduct of credit reporting and credit reporting services, to provide safeguards for data protection for customers of credit providers and for connected matters.
For the second reading and committal of bills, the chair recognizes the Honourable Member for Bamboo Town.
Mr. Speaker, there are no further second readings of bills. I do now move, Mr. Speaker, that the House does resolve itself into a committee of the whole with the Deputy Speaker and the Chair.
It has been moved and seconded that the House resolve itself into a committee of the whole House. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those who oppose will stand. The House will now resolve itself into a committee of the whole House with the Deputy Speaker and the Chair.
Committee of the Whole.
Mr. Chair, I do now move that the long title of the bill be agreed.
It's been moved and seconded that the long title of the bill be agreed. As many as that are in favor remain seated. Those opposing would rise. The long title is agreed.
Mr. Chair, I do now move that the short title of the bill be agreed.
It's been moved and seconded that the short title of the bill be agreed. As many that are in favor will remain seated. Those opposing will stand. The short title is agreed.
Mr. Chair, I do now move that clauses 2 through 54 be agreed.
It's been moved and seconded that clause 2 through 54 be agreed. As many that are in favor will remain seated. Those opposing will rise. Clause 2 through 54 is agreed.
Mr. Chair, I do now move that the schedule be agreed.
It's been moved and seconded that the schedule bill be agreed. As many that are in favor will remain seated. Those opposing will rise. The schedule has been agreed.
Mr. Chair, I do now move that the credit reporting bill in its entirety be agreed.
It's been moved and seconded that the bill in its entirety be agreed. As many that are in favor will remain seated. Those opposing will rise. The bill in its entirety has been agreed.
Mr. Chair, I do now move that the Speaker do now take the chair.
It's been moved and seconded that the Speaker now do take the chair. As many that are in favor will remain seated. Those opposing will rise. The motion is carried. The Speaker will now take the chair. Speaker, I beg leave to report that the Committee of the Whole has gone through the bill, having made no amendments thereto.
It has been reported by the Deputy Speaker and Chairman of the Committee of the Whole House that the committee has gone through the bill, having made no amendment thereto. Third reading and passing of bills. The Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Bamboo Town.
Mr. Speaker, I do now move that the bill, credit reporting bill, be passed in its entirety, be read a third time and passed.
It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read a third time. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those who oppose will stand. Order that the bill be read a third time and passed.
A bill for an act to provide for a fair and accurate credit reporting system within the financial system in order to assure objective credit decisions, to enable credit information sharing and reporting, to provide for the regulation of the conduct of credit reporting and credit reporting services, to provide safeguard for data protection for customers of credit providers and for connected matters.
Order that the bill do now pass, and the title of the bill be the Credit Reporting Bill 2018. For the third reading of bills, the chair recognizes the honorable member for Bamboo Town.
Mr. Speaker, there are no further third readings.
Third readings, consideration of Senate amendments, resolutions, member statements, appointment of select committees, instruction to select committees, discharge of select committees, notices for future meetings. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Bamboo Town.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to renew all matters in the name of the government of the Bahamas and to move that the House do adjourn until February the 7th, Wednesday, at 10 a.m.
Second. It has been moved and seconded that the business of this House do adjourn to 10 a.m. February the 7th, 2018. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those who oppose will stand. Final adjournment.
Mr. Speaker, I do not move that the House adjourns.
It has been moved and seconded that the business of this House do now adjourn to 10 a.m. February 7th, 2018. The business, as many as are in favor, will remain seated. Those who oppose will stand. The House stands adjourned.